Sometimes, the hardest thing a father can do is choose between what everyone expects and what his heart knows is right. Ray Holler learned that truth at 53, standing in his empty apartment with $500 and a phone call from his ex-wife demanding every last cent. He could have given her the money. He could have tried one more time to buy peace. Instead, he bought a broken-down house in rural Indiana that nobody wanted. His son called him crazy. His ex-wife threatened to take him back to court. But Ray saw something in that crumbling foreclosure that others couldn't see. A chance to build something that mattered. What he found hidden inside those walls would prove him right in ways he never imagined. Before we go further, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. Ray Holler's hands told the story of his life better than words ever could. At 53, they were maps of hard work, scarred knuckles from stripped bolts, calluses thick as leather from decades gripping wrenches, and a crooked pinky finger that had healed wrong after a transmission crushed it back in '98. Those hands had built engines, changed 10,000 oil filters, and signed divorce papers that cost him nearly everything he owned. The apartment he rented on the east side of Bloomington wasn't much. A one-bedroom walk-up above a laundromat where the smell of detergent and hot lint was so constant he'd stopped noticing it years ago. The walls were thin enough that he could hear Mrs. Patterson's television through the drywall every night, the drone of game shows and sitcom laugh tracks marking the hours until he could finally sleep. His furniture consisted of a sagging couch he'd pulled from a curb, a kitchen table with 3 mismatched chairs, and a mattress on the floor in the bedroom. The second bedroom, barely bigger than a closet, held a twin bed he'd bought at Goodwill for his son's visits. Micah was 16 now, tall and angular in that way teenage boys get when they shoot up faster than their bodies can fill out. He had his mother's dark eyes and Ray's stubborn jawline, though Ray wished the boy had inherited something better than stubbornness from him. These days, Micah wore his resentment like armor. Tight shoulders, clipped answers, eyes that looked past Ray rather than at him. The court had granted Ray custody 8 months ago after a battle that lasted 2 years and cost him $43,000 he didn't have. He'd won, technically. But sitting across from his silent son at that scratched kitchen table felt like losing every single night. Linda, his ex-wife, had fought him with everything she had, not because she particularly wanted full custody. Ray had figured that out early on, but because she couldn't stand the idea of him having it. Their marriage had ended badly, the kind of slow poison that seeps into everything before you realize you're drowning. She'd wanted more than Ray could give on a mechanic's salary. More house, more vacations, more of the life she saw her friends posting on social media. Ray had wanted simple things. Sunday mornings drinking coffee, teaching Micah how to change a tire, a partner who didn't measure love in dollar signs. The divorce itself had been relatively clean. It was the custody fight that came after that bled him dry. Linda had hired a lawyer who wore suits that probably cost more than Ray made in a month. She'd painted Ray as unreliable, directionless, a man who couldn't provide stability for a growing boy. Never mind that Ray had worked at Henderson's auto shop for 17 years, without missing more than a handful of days. Never mind that he'd been the one who showed up to every parent-teacher conference, every baseball game, every moment that mattered when they were still married. The judge had eventually seen through Linda's performance, but the legal fees had crushed Ray financially. His savings, 22 years of putting away whatever he could, vanished into retainer fees and court costs. He'd taken out a loan against his truck. He'd sold his tools, then bought cheaper ones, then sold those too. By the time the custody agreement was signed, Ray Holler had $517 to his name and a teenage son who barely spoke to him. Henderson's auto shop sat on the corner of Walnut and 7th, a squat brick building with 3 bays and a waiting room that smelled like burnt coffee and decades of motor oil. Ray had started there right out of high school, back when Henderson Sr. still ran the place. Now it was Henderson Jr., Bobby to his friends, a decent man who paid fair and didn't ask questions when Ray needed to leave early for court dates. The work was steady, if not exciting. Oil changes, brake jobs, the occasional transmission rebuild. Ray was good at it, the kind of good that comes from repetition and genuine care. He treated every customer's car like it mattered, because to them, it did. His co-workers had watched the divorce and custody battle from a respectful distance, offering support in the way working men do. A beer after shift, help moving into the apartment, silence when silence was what Ray needed most. Danny Kowalski, who worked the bay next to Ray's, had been particularly steady throughout it all. Danny was younger, maybe 35, with a wife and 2 little girls he talked about constantly. He'd slip Ray extra hours when he could, recommend him for the better-paying jobs, cover for him when exhaustion made Ray's hands shake. The phone call came on a Tuesday night in late September. Ray had just gotten home from a 10-hour shift, his back aching and his hands still smelling like brake fluid despite washing them 3 times. Micah was in his room with the door closed, headphones on, visible through the gap at the bottom of the door by the light from his phone. Ray had learned not to knock anymore. The boy would come out when he was hungry or needed something, and pushing for more just led to arguments that left them both feeling worse. Ray's phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. Linda's name on the screen made his stomach tighten the way it always did now. Their communication had been minimal since the custody arrangement finalized. Logistics mostly, pick-up times and school forms. He considered letting it go to voicemail, then answered because ignoring Linda never made things easier. Ray. Her voice was clipped, businesslike. She'd perfected that tone during the divorce proceedings. Linda, what do you need? I need to talk about Micah's winter expenses. He needs new winter clothes, boots, a proper coat. The stuff he has doesn't fit anymore. Ray leaned against the counter, closing his eyes. I just bought him clothes last month. He's growing, Ray. That's what teenagers do. I'm not calling to argue about biology. A pause, then her voice shifted into that reasonable tone she used when she was building to something. Look, I know money's tight for you right now. I'm trying to help. If you could send me $500, I can handle getting everything he needs. Consider it your contribution to his care. $500. Ray opened his eyes and looked at the small notebook he kept by the coffee maker, where he tracked every dollar in and out with the precision of a man who couldn't afford mistakes. Rent was due in 10 days. He had $517 in his checking account. After rent, that left him $17 for 2 weeks of food, gas, and anything else that came up. That's not how this works, Linda. We have a custody agreement. I provide for him here. You provide? Her laugh was sharp. Ray, he lives in an apartment above a laundromat. He sleeps in a room the size of a closet. You're barely keeping your head above water, and we both know it. I'm doing fine. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you bankrupted yourself to win a custody battle out of pride, and now you can't actually afford to raise him. Her voice softened artificially. I'm not trying to hurt you, Ray. I'm trying to help our son. $500, that's all I'm asking. For Micah. Ray's jaw tightened. Everything was for Micah. Every request, every demand, every way she'd found to make him feel like he was failing. And maybe he was. Maybe she was right about the pride, about the apartment, about the fact that he was one blown transmission away from not being able to afford groceries. I'll figure something out for his clothes, Ray said finally. But I can't send you $500 right now. Can't or won't? Does it matter? Linda sighed. That long, suffering sound that used to make Ray apologize reflexively. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You fought so hard to take him from me, and now you can't even provide basic necessities. Maybe we need to revisit. Don't. Ray's voice came out harder than he intended. "Don't threaten to take him back to court. We're done with that." "Then send me the money, Ray. Prove you can actually take care of him." She hung up before he could respond. Ray stood in his kitchen, holding his phone, feeling the weight of everything pressed down on his shoulders. Through Micah's bedroom door, he could hear the muffled sound of music. His son, right there, close enough to touch but impossibly far away. Ray opened his laptop, an old machine that took 3 minutes to boot up. He'd started looking at cheaper apartments a few weeks ago, places further from town where rent might be $400 instead of $650. But then Micah would have to change schools, lose what few friends he'd made. Ray couldn't do that to him. The property listings website loaded slowly. Ray scrolled past apartments to a section he'd looked at before, mostly out of curiosity: foreclosures and auction properties. Houses so cheap they seemed like mistakes. Most were in terrible condition or located in towns so small they barely had gas stations. He'd looked at them the way a drowning man looks at distant shore, knowing it's impossible but looking anyway. That's when he saw it. 1247 Oak Ridge Road, Nashville, Indiana. Brown County. Cash sale, as is. $500. $500 for a house. It had to be a typo. Ray clicked through to the listing, his heart beating faster. The photos loaded one by one, grainy, probably taken on someone's phone. A 2-story structure, white paint peeling away to expose gray wood underneath. Windows broken or missing. A porch that sagged in the middle like a swayback horse. Ivy consumed most of the front facade, nature slowly reclaiming what humans had abandoned. The description was minimal. Foreclosed property, sold as is. Structure requires significant repair. 3-bed, 1-bath, approximately 1,400 square 3 acres. Cash only, no inspections, no warranties. Property sells November 1st to highest bidder, minimum bid $500. Ray zoomed in on the photos. Behind the decay, he could see the bones of something that had once been solid. Craftsman style, probably built in the 20s or 30s. The roof looked bad, but the foundation stones seemed intact. The property had a barn too, collapsed on one side but still standing. 3 acres meant space, meant distance from neighbors, meant Micah could breathe without hearing Mrs. Patterson's television through the wall. It was insane. $500 was all he had. If he bought this house, he'd be betting everything on a structure that might not even be salvageable. No money for materials, no money for mistakes, no safety net at all. Linda would call him reckless, irresponsible, exactly the kind of father who shouldn't have custody. But Ray kept staring at those photos, kept imagining Micah in a real bedroom with a door that closed and walls thick enough to keep the world out. Kept thinking about the 3 acres and the barn and the possibility, however slim, of building something that belonged to them. Not rented, not temporary, but theirs. He looked at his notebook again. $517. Rent or a house. Safety or a gamble. Ray had spent 2 years and $43,000 fighting for custody because he believed Micah deserved a father who wouldn't give up on him. He'd lost everything else proving that point. What was 500 more? At 1 in the morning, Ray filled out the online bidding form. He entered his debit card information, his hands steady despite his racing heart. The confirmation email arrived 3 minutes later. Congratulations, you are the winning bidder for 1247 Oak Ridge Road. Property transfers upon payment and signature. Ray closed his laptop and sat in the dark kitchen, listening to the hum of the laundromat's dryers below and wondering if he'd just made the best or worst decision of his life. Probably both. Outside his window, Bloomington glowed with street lights and the distant sound of traffic. By this time next month, they'd be somewhere else. Somewhere quieter, somewhere broken, somewhere that was theirs to fix or fail with. He thought about calling Linda back, telling her he'd found a solution to their space problem, but she'd only hear the risk, not the possibility. She'd weaponize it in court if she could, use it as proof that Ray was unstable, impulsive, dragging their son into disaster. Maybe she'd be right. Ray honestly didn't know anymore. All he knew was that $500 could buy peace for 2 weeks or a chance at something more. He'd chosen the chance. Now he'd have to live with it and somehow convince his son that a condemned house in the middle of nowhere was actually a home. The drive to Brown County took 2 hours through October countryside painted in rust and gold. Ray had told Micah they were going to look at a property, kept the details vague because he wasn't sure how to explain what he'd done. The boy sat in the passenger seat of Ray's truck, earbuds in, staring out the window at the rolling hills and patches of forest that grew thicker as they left Bloomington behind. Ray had picked Micah up that Saturday morning with coffee and gas station donuts, a peace offering the boy had accepted with a grunt. They'd driven in silence through the suburbs, past strip malls and subdivisions, until the landscape opened up into farmland and scattered small towns. Nashville, Indiana was barely a town at all, a main street with antique shops and a general store, the kind of place tourists visited in fall to look at leaves and buy handmade soap. Oak Ridge Road was 3 miles outside Nashville proper, a narrow 2-lane that wound through forest and past properties marked only by rusted mailboxes and gravel driveways disappearing into trees. Ray almost missed the turn, catching it at the last second, when he spotted the number 1247 on a mailbox that hung at an angle, ready to fall. The driveway was less a driveway and more a suggestion. 2 worn tracks through tall grass and weeds, branches scraping the sides of the truck as Ray eased forward. The trees broke suddenly into a clearing, and there it was. The photos hadn't lied, but they hadn't captured the full scope of abandonment either. The house stood like a ghost at the center of 3 overgrown acres, its white paint not just peeling but mostly gone, revealing weathered clapboard that had turned silver gray with age and exposure. The front porch sagged dramatically in the middle, the support posts rotted through at the base. Every window Ray could see was either broken or missing entirely. Dark openings that gave the house the appearance of a school. Ivy covered the entire right side of the structure, thick ropey vines that had worked their way under the siding and probably into the walls themselves. The roof showed multiple spots of damage, missing shingles, a visible hole near the chimney, everything slightly off-level in a way that suggested the whole structure had settled unevenly over the years. Behind the house, the barn leaned heavily to one side, its roof collapsed inward. Rusted farm equipment, an old plow, something that might have been a tractor once, sat in the tall grass like the bones of metal dinosaurs. The clearing was bordered by thick woods on 3 sides. Trees that pressed in close, as if waiting to reclaim the land entirely. Ray put the truck in park and killed the engine. The silence that followed was profound. No traffic noise, no neighbors, just wind moving through branches and the occasional bird call. Micah pulled out his earbuds slowly, staring at the house through the windshield. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "What is this?" "It's ours," Ray said quietly. "I bought it." Micah turned to look at his father, his face a mixture of confusion and something approaching horror. "You bought this? $500. It's a foreclosure? The whole property, 3 acres, the house, the barn." "Dad." Micah's voice was flat. "This isn't a house. This is a demolition site." "It needs work." "Work?" Micah laughed, a sharp sound with no humor in it. "It needs a wrecking ball. Please tell me you didn't actually spend money on this." Ray gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "I spent $500, everything I had." "Everything?" Micah stared at him. "The money Mom called about? The money for my clothes? You spent that on this? Your mother wanted that money for herself, not for you. She wanted to prove I couldn't provide, wanted to use it against me. So I found another solution. This. Micah gestured at the wreck in front of them. This is your solution. We can't live here, Dad. Look at it. There aren't even windows. We'll fix it. With what money? You just said you spent everything. Micah's voice was rising now, all the frustration and resentment of the past 8 months pouring out. Do you even think? Ever? Or do you just do whatever random thing pops, into your head and hope it works out? Ray flinched but kept his voice level. I think about you. Every decision I make is about giving you something better. Better than what? An apartment with a roof and running water? Because I'm pretty sure this place doesn't have either of those things. Micah yanked on the door handle, shoving the truck door open. I need air. Ray watched his son stalk toward the house, hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders tight with anger. He'd known Micah would react badly. He'd prepared himself for it, but watching the boy's disappointment manifest felt like being kicked in the chest anyway. Ray climbed out of the truck, the October air cool against his face. Leaves crunched under his boots as he followed Micah toward the porch. Up close, the damage was even more apparent. The porch steps were rotted through, the wood soft and crumbling. Ray tested the edge of the porch itself, found a solid spot, and pulled himself up carefully. The front door was closed but not locked. The lock mechanism had rusted away to nothing. The door swung open with a horror movie creak, revealing darkness and the thick smell of mold and decay. Ray pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped inside. The interior was worse than the exterior. Water damage had stained the walls and ceiling in brown blooms. The hardwood floors were warped and buckled, some boards missing entirely to reveal the crawl space below. Plaster had fallen from the ceiling in chunks, leaving gaps that showed ancient lath and electrical wiring that probably hadn't been up to code in 50 years. But the structure itself, the bones of the place, seemed solid. The walls were plumb, the ceiling joists visible through the gaps looked intact. The brick chimney that rose through the center of the house showed no obvious cracks. It was damaged, severely damaged, but not beyond saving. Maybe. Micah appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright morning. It smells like something died in here. Probably did, Ray admitted. Raccoons, possums, who knows what's been living here? They moved through the first floor together, Ray pointing out features that existed more in potential than reality. The living room with its brick fireplace, the kitchen with its ancient porcelain sink still attached to the wall, the dining room with built-in shelves that had somehow survived. Micah said nothing, his face carefully blank. A staircase in the hallway led to the second floor, the steps creaking ominously under Ray's weight but holding. 3 bedrooms upstairs, all in similar states of decay. One still had wallpaper clinging to the walls in strips, a floral pattern that might have been cheerful once. Another had a child's drawing pinned to the wall with a thumbtack that had rusted solid. A crayon stick figure house with a smiling sun, dated in a child's handwriting. June 1994. Micah paused at the drawing, reached up to touch it, then pulled his hand back. Someone lived here. Until about 20 years ago, looks like, Ray said, shining his light around the room. Then they left everything. Why? Don't know. Foreclosure, maybe. Hard times. Ray moved to the window, looking out over the overgrown property. From up here, he could see past the barn to where the woods grew thick. People leave places for all kinds of reasons. Micah stood in the center of the room, turning slowly. This is crazy, Dad. Even if we could fix it up, and that's a huge if, we don't have money to live on while we do it. We don't have materials. We don't even have electricity or water out here. I checked before I bought it. Power and water are still connected. Just shut off. $50 to turn them back on. The well is probably good. These old properties usually had solid wells. Septic's out back somewhere. Might need work, but those systems last forever if they're maintained. And if they're not maintained? Ray turned to face his son. Then we figure it out. Micah, I know this looks impossible right now. I know you think I've lost my mind, but look around. Really look. This place has good bones. It was built to last. Someone loved it once, made a home here. We can do that too. We don't know how to do any of this. I know how to fix things. That's what I do for a living. And you're smart, you can learn. We'll take it one step at a time. Ray crossed the room, stood in front of his son. I didn't buy this place to hurt you or make your life harder. I bought it because I'm tired of living in a space so small we can't breathe without bumping into each other. Tired of you hiding in a closet-sized room because there's nowhere else to go. This place, it's rough now, but it's ours. No landlord, no rent, just ours. Doesn't that mean something? Micah's jaw worked, emotions crossing his face too fast to name. Finally, he said, it means you made a decision without asking me. Again. Just like the custody thing, just like everything. You decide what's best for me without actually caring what I think. That's not. It is. Micah's voice cracked slightly. You wanted custody so bad you didn't even ask if I wanted to live with you. You just fought and spent all that money, and now we're broke and you've bought a haunted house in the middle of nowhere because you think you know what's best. But you don't. You don't know anything about what I want. Ray felt the words land like punches. Then tell me, what do you want? Micah looked away, staring at that child's drawing on the wall. I want things to stop changing. I want to not feel like everyone's pulling me in different directions. I want... He stopped, swallowed hard. I don't know what I want, okay? But I know it's not this. Ray's phone rang, loud in the empty room. Linda's name flashed on the screen. Of course. Ray answered, keeping his voice neutral. Linda. Where are you? Her tone was sharp. I've been calling Micah. His phone's going straight to voicemail. We're out of town. Spotty service. Out of town where? Ray glanced at Micah, saw the warning in the boy's eyes. Just looking at something. We'll be back tonight. Looking at what, Ray? Does it matter? It matters if you're dragging our son around on some scheme instead of... She paused, and Ray could hear the shift in her breathing, the way she did when she was about to deploy her weapons. I talked to my lawyer yesterday about the living situation. She thinks we have grounds to request a modification. Modification of what? The custody arrangement, on the basis that you can't provide adequate housing. Linda's voice was calm now. Reasonable. The tone she used when she thought she'd already won. I'm not trying to punish you, Ray. I'm trying to do what's best for Micah. He deserves stability, and you're clearly not in a position to provide that right now. Ray's hand tightened on the phone. The custody agreement is 8 months old, Linda. You can't just change it because you feel like it. I can if circumstances have changed. And they have, haven't they? You're barely scraping by, living in that apartment, working all hours. Meanwhile, I have a stable home, financial security, everything Micah needs. Everything except me. Don't make this dramatic. This is about what's practical. Give me the money I asked for. Prove you can actually contribute to his care. Or I'm filing for modification next week. Your choice. She hung up. Ray stood in the abandoned bedroom, holding his dead phone, feeling the walls close in. Micah was watching him, already knowing, always knowing when his mother had twisted the knife. She's going to try to take me back, Micah said quietly. She's going to try. Doesn't mean she'll succeed. If she knew about this place, Micah gestured at the decaying room around them. Dad, this would be all the proof she needs that you can't take care of me. Ray's jaw tightened. Then we don't tell her. Not yet. Not until we've made it something. That's insane. We can't hide a whole house. We can for a while. Long enough to make it livable. Ray moved toward the stairs, his mind already working through the logistics. We've got time. Your mom can threaten all she wants, but actually filing for modification takes months. The legal process doesn't move fast. We can use that time." Micah followed him down the stairs, through the ruined first floor, back out into the October sunshine that felt too bright after the darkness inside. "So what? We just move in here. To a house with no power, no water, holes in the floor. We make it work. I've got tools. I can borrow more from Henderson. We start with the basics. Get the power on, get the water running, patch the worst of the holes. We camp out if we have to. I've slept in worse places." "This is crazy." "Probably." Ray walked to the truck, pulled out the property deed he'd printed that morning. The paper felt substantial in his hands, real in a way nothing else had felt in months. "But it's our crazy. Not your mother's, not the court's. Ours." Micah stood in the overgrown grass, looking at the house, then at his father, then back at the house. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the smell of autumn and decay and possibility. "She's going to destroy you with this," Micah said finally. "Maybe, but at least I'll go down building something instead of just surviving in a space too small for either of us." Ray folded the deed, tucked it back in his pocket. "I'm not asking you to understand right now. I'm just asking you to trust me long enough to see what this could be." Micah's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, looked at the screen. 17 missed calls from his mother. He turned the phone off completely and shoved it in his pocket. "1 month," he said. "You've got 1 month to make this place livable. If we're still camping in a horror movie set by Thanksgiving, I'm telling Mom everything." It wasn't trust. It wasn't even really agreement. But it was something, and Ray would take it. Ray used 3 days of vacation time from Henderson's, days he'd been saving for an emergency that never seemed quite urgent enough until now. He loaded his truck with everything useful from the apartment. His tools, camping gear, a propane stove, sleeping bags, a cooler. Micah packed his clothes and school books with the resigned air of a prisoner accepting his sentence. They moved into 1247 Oak Ridge Road on a Tuesday morning in late October, the temperature already dropping toward winter. Ray had called the utility company and paid to have the power switched on. When he flipped the breaker and the single working light bulb in the kitchen flickered to life, it felt like a minor miracle. The water took longer. The pipes knocked and groaned, coughing up rust-colored liquid for 20 minutes before running clear enough to use. The first night, they slept in the living room on camping pads spread across the warped floorboards, the brick fireplace offering minimal heat from a fire ray built with wood he'd found stacked in the barn. The house made sounds, settling creaks, wind through gaps in the walls, something scurrying in the attic. Micah lay rigid in his sleeping bag, staring at shadows on the ceiling, while Ray pretended to sleep and planned tomorrow's work in his head. Morning came cold and gray. Ray woke before dawn, his back aching from the hard floor, and started coffee on the propane stove. He'd bought boards and plywood at the lumberyard in Nashville, charged them to a credit card he'd promised himself he wouldn't use except for absolute necessities. This qualified. The broken windows were letting in weather and animals, and neither seemed interested in being polite about it. Micah emerged from his sleeping bag like a bear from hibernation, hair sticking up, face creased from the pillow. "It's freezing. Get dressed. We're starting on the windows." They worked through that first day in a kind of focused silence, Ray measuring and cutting boards to fit the window openings while Micah held pieces steady and passed tools. It wasn't skilled work, just temporary protection. Plywood screwed over the gaps where glass had been, keeping the worst of the weather out until Ray could afford real windows. But it felt good to be doing something, transforming damage into something slightly less damaged. By evening, they'd covered 6 windows. The house felt darker but warmer, more contained. Ray made dinner on the propane stove, canned soup and bread, and they ate sitting on the porch steps, watching the sun drop behind the trees. The silence between them felt less hostile than it had, more like shared exhaustion. "My teacher asked where I'm living now," Micah said, breaking the quiet. "For emergency contact stuff." "What did you tell her?" "Nashville, Indiana. She'd never heard of it." Micah tore a piece of bread into smaller pieces, not eating it. "Kids at school think I moved to Tennessee." "Did you correct them?" "No. Easier to let them think I'm far away." Micah glanced at his father. "Mom's been texting, asking questions." "About?" "Where we are, what we're doing, if you're being responsible." The word responsible carried Linda's inflection. "I haven't answered most of them." Ray nodded slowly. "She's building a case, looking for ammunition." "I know." Micah finally ate the bread he'd been destroying. "She's got Marcus helping her. He's been asking about you at family stuff." The name Marcus made Ray's jaw tighten. Marcus Brennan, Linda's older brother, the family golden boy with his accounting firm and his perfect house in Carmel. Ray had never liked the man, though he'd struggled to articulate why. Something about the way Marcus watched people, assessed them, found their weak points. Linda trusted her brother completely, let him influence her decisions, including the decision to fight Ray for custody. "What's Marcus asking?" "Whether you're stable. Whether I feel safe with you. Weird stuff." Micah shrugged, uncomfortable. "He's always been kind of strange around me. Pays too much attention, you know, asks too many questions." Ray felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Strange how?" "Just," Micah struggled for words, "like he's studying me, trying to figure out how to talk to me. It's probably nothing, he's just awkward, but it makes me uncomfortable." Ray filed that information away, something to think about later when he wasn't so tired. "If he ever makes you uncomfortable, you tell me. Immediately. Don't wait. Don't worry about being polite. You tell me." Micah looked at his father, surprised by the intensity. "Okay? Yeah, okay." They finished eating in the twilight, the woods around them coming alive with evening sounds. An owl called from somewhere in the trees. In the distance, a dog barked. The house behind them stood dark except for the single kitchen light burning like a promise. The rest of that first week fell into a rhythm. Ray worked at Henderson's during the day while Micah went to school in Nashville, a 40-minute bus ride each way that the boy claimed to hate, but Ray suspected he appreciated for the time alone. Evenings, they worked on the house until dark, then studied or read by LED lantern light until exhaustion pulled them into sleep. Ray focused on the basics, stabilizing the porch, patching the worst holes in the floor, addressing the roof leak near the chimney. He worked with a kind of desperate efficiency, knowing every day that passed was a day Linda could decide to act on her threats. The physical labor felt good after hours bent over engines. Different muscles, different problems, but the same satisfaction of making something work that hadn't worked before. On Friday evening, Ray was clearing debris from the kitchen when his pry bar caught on something behind a cabinet that hung crooked on the wall. The cabinet shifted and something fluttered to the floor, a photograph, or rather a Polaroid, bent and faded but still intact. Ray picked it up, wiped dust from the surface. The image showed 3 people standing in front of this house. But the house as it must have looked 25 years ago, paint fresh and white, porch straight, flower boxes under the windows, a man in his 30s, brown hair and work clothes, arm around a woman with gentle eyes and a tired smile. Between them, a girl maybe 7 or 8, grinning at the camera with missing front teeth. Someone had written on the white border at the bottom in fading ink, "Thomas, Sarah, Emma, summer 94. Ray turned the photo over. On the back, more writing. "First summer in the dream house. T finally finished the porch. Emma loves her room, so much work ahead. But we're happy." The dream house. Ray looked around the ruined kitchen and tried to imagine it as someone's dream. Tried to imagine the man in the photo, Thomas, standing where Ray stood now, looking at these same walls with hope instead of despair. "What's that?" Micah appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder. Ray handed him the photo. "Found it behind the cabinet. Previous owners, I think. The Carvers." Micah studied the image. "They look happy." They were, in '94 anyway. "What happened to them?" "Don't know yet." Ray took the photo back, looked at the little girl's smile. "Emma. But they loved this place once. That's something." That weekend, Ray made the drive to the Brown County Public Library, a small brick building on the edge of Nashville proper. The librarian, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain, showed him how to access property records on their computer system. Ray searched for 1247 Oak Ridge Road, pulled up what history existed. The records were sparse but telling. Thomas Carver had purchased the property in March 1989 for $38,000. A working-class family taking a chance on a fixer-upper. The house had been old even then, built in 1927, and had gone through several owners over the decades. The Carvers had lived there for at least 10 years. Ray found tax records through 1999. Then nothing. The property showed up on foreclosure listings in 2002, sold to a bank, then sat empty for 2 decades until Ray bought it for $500. But what happened between 1999 and 2002? What made a family who'd invested a decade into their dream house simply abandon it? Ray searched newspaper archives, found nothing. Asked the librarian if she remembered anything about the Carvers. She shook her head. Too many people passed through small towns to remember one family from 20 years ago. Ray returned to the house as afternoon shadows grew long, the photo and the property records in a folder on his passenger seat. Thomas and Sarah Carver. Emma, who'd loved her room. A family that had vanished like smoke, leaving only traces behind. Micah was in the barn when Ray arrived, poking through the old equipment and debris that filled the structure. Ray found him examining a rusted bicycle, child-sized, half buried in decades of leaves and dirt. "Think this was hers?" Micah asked, nodding toward the bike. "Emma's?" "Maybe." Ray crouched down, pulled more debris away. The bike was pink, or had been before rust claimed it, with streamers on the handlebars reduced to plastic tatters. Probably. Why would they leave it? People leave things when they're in a hurry, or when taking them would hurt too much. Ray straightened, his knees protesting. "I found some records. The family lived here from '89 to at least '99. Then they just disappeared from the property records. House foreclosed in 2002. 10 years. Micah looked back toward the house. "That's longer than Mom and you were married." "Yeah. So they had time to make it home. Really home. And then something made them leave everything behind." Micah's voice was quiet. "That's sad." Ray put a hand on his son's shoulder, a gesture Micah didn't pull away from. "Houses hold stories. This one's got at least one we don't know yet." They walked back to the house together, the October air sharp with coming winter. Inside, Micah made a fire while Ray unpacked groceries, real food now that they had a way to keep things cold in the creek behind the house. They were eating better than they had in the apartment, Ray realized. Steak on the camp grill, fresh vegetables from a farm stand, bread from a bakery in Nashville. Something about the physical work made them both ravenous, and there was satisfaction in earning hunger through labor. After dinner, Micah retreated to what they'd claimed as his room, the upstairs space with the child's drawing still pinned to the wall. Ray had offered to take it down, but Micah said it should stay. "She lived here first," he'd said. "Seems wrong to erase her." Ray spent the evening in the living room, examining the Polaroid under better light. 3 people, smiling, standing in front of a house that had promise. He thought about The child's drawing upstairs, dated June 1994, the same summer as this photo. Thought about the bike in the barn, abandoned. Thought about a family that disappeared into whatever life came after this one. His phone buzzed. A text from Danny. "How's the death trap? Need help this weekend?" Ray smiled, typed back. "Could use a hand with the porch if you're free Saturday. Bring your tool belt." "Done, beers on you." At least some things were simple. At least he had allies, even if they were few. Ray put his phone away and added the photo to a box he'd started keeping, artifacts of the house's history. The Carvers might be gone, but their dream wasn't entirely dead. Someone was here now, trying again, betting everything on bones and possibility. Outside, the owl called again. Inside, the fire crackled. Upstairs, Micah's LED light cast shadows under his door. Ray sat in the darkness, surrounded by broken things he was slowly making whole, and felt something he hadn't felt in months. Not quite hope, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. The second week brought rain, cold October storms that found every gap in the house's defenses and exploited them mercilessly. Water came through the roof patch Ray had made, dripped from ceiling seams, pooled on window sills. They spent 2 days chasing leaks with buckets and tarps, Ray cursing his amateur repairs, while Micah helped in resigned silence. But the work was progress. Slow, incremental, sometimes invisible, but progress nonetheless. The porch no longer sagged dramatically. Ray had jacked up the middle section and replaced the rotten support posts with pressure-treated lumber. 6 of the 12 windows now had actual glass, salvaged from a demolition sale in Bloomington and carefully installed. The kitchen sink worked, producing clear well water that Ray had tested at the health department and found safe. Ray returned to full-time work at Henderson's, needing the paycheck more than the vacation days. The commute was longer now, 45 minutes each way, but he didn't mind the drive. It gave him time to think, to plan, to mentally catalog everything the house still needed. The list was long enough to be overwhelming if he looked at it all at once, so Ray focused on one item at a time. Today, fix the bathroom plumbing. Tomorrow, address the soft spot in the hallway floor. Next week, do something about the attic access that seemed to be serving as a raccoon highway. Micah adapted in the way teenagers do, with visible reluctance but surprising resilience. He complained about the cold, the lack of a proper shower, the 40-minute bus ride to school, but he'd stopped talking about the apartment like it was paradise lost. And he'd started, tentatively, to explore the property. Ray would come home to find Micah clearing brush from the barn or examining the old stone foundation that outlined where a garden must have been once. The house was revealing itself to them in layers. Behind water-stained wallpaper in the dining room, Ray discovered the original plaster, painted a soft blue. Under the ruined linoleum in the kitchen, hardwood flooring in surprisingly good condition. In the barn, beneath decades of junk, a workbench built solidly enough to survive everything time had thrown at it. And there were the small things left behind by the Carvers, evidence of interrupted lives. A coffee mug in a cabinet, "World's Best Dad" printed on the side. A measuring tape with T. Carver written in permanent marker on the belt clip. A child's rain boots, size 2, tucked in a corner of a closet. It was Micah who made the next significant discovery. Ray came home on a Tuesday evening to find his son in the upstairs hallway, examining the wall with unusual intensity. Micah had removed the electrical outlet cover and was peering into the gap with his phone's flashlight. "What are you doing?" Ray asked, setting down his lunchbox. "This wall sounds wrong." Micah rapped his knuckles against the drywall, then moved 2 feet over and did it again. "Hear that? Different sound. This section's hollow." Ray listened. Micah was right. One section produced a deeper, emptier sound. Could just be different framing, Old houses are weird. Or it could be something else. Micah moved to the other side of the hallway, rapped on that wall. This side sounds solid all the way across. But this side... He moved along the wall, knocking every few inches. From here to here, it's hollow. That's like 6 feet of hollow wall. Ray pulled out his tape measure, started noting dimensions. The hallway was 8 feet wide, running from the top of the stairs to the back bedroom. He measured the exterior dimensions of that back bedroom, then measured the interior, did the same for the room on the other side of the hall. The numbers didn't add up. Son of a... Ray measured again, more carefully. The exterior wall of the house suggested the second floor should be 42 feet long, but adding up all the interior rooms and hallway, he only got 38 feet. 4 feet missing. Maybe 5. What does that mean? Micah asked, watching his father work. Means either this house defies physics or there's space we can't account for. Ray stood back, studying the hallway with new eyes. Old houses sometimes had odd spaces, storage, mechanical access, places for pipes or wires, but 5 feet is too much for that. Could be a mistake in the original construction. Could be, or could be something else. Ray thought about the Carvers, about Thomas spending years on renovations, about Sarah's mention in the property listing description of significant modifications. Let me check something. He went downstairs to his box of house artifacts, pulled out the Polaroid of the Carver family. In the background, visible behind them, was the house. Ray examined it closely, looking at the roofline, the window placement. Then he went outside in the fading light and looked at the actual house, comparing. The window placement matched mostly, but the roofline, there was something slightly off about it. A subtle variation in height right above where that hollow section of hallway should be, as if something had been built up, extended, modified. Ray went back inside. Micah was still in the hallway, running his hands along the wall as if he could feel secrets through the drywall. Find anything? Ray asked. Maybe. Micah pointed to a section of baseboard that ran along the floor. This piece looks newer than the rest. Different paint, less worn. Ray knelt down, examined the baseboard. Micah was right. This section was in better condition, slightly different in profile from the rest of the trim. Ray pulled out his utility knife, scored the paint seal, and carefully pried the baseboard away from the wall. Behind it, where the baseboard had been, someone had cut a neat rectangular hole in the drywall, about 4 inches by 8 inches. The hole had been covered by the baseboard, invisible until you removed it, and inside the hole, wedged into the wall cavity, was an envelope. Ray pulled it out carefully. The envelope was yellowed, unsealed, addressed to no one. Inside, 3 pages of lined notebook paper covered in handwriting. Ray unfolded them, Micah reading over his shoulder. The letter was dated June 12th, 1997. Written by Sarah Carver to her sister. Dear Michelle, it began. I'm writing this because I need to tell someone, and Thomas doesn't want anyone to know. He thinks if we keep it private, we can manage it ourselves. But I'm scared, and I don't know what else to do. Ray kept reading, his unease growing with each line. Thomas has been working on a project in the house for almost 2 years now. At first, it was just normal renovation, fixing the upstairs bathroom, replacing some flooring, but then he started talking about making changes. Secret changes, he called them. Changes Emma needed. I didn't understand at first, but Thomas said Emma needed a safe place, somewhere no one could find her when she got frightened. You know how she is, Michelle. The nightmares, the episodes where she can't calm down. The doctors say it's anxiety, maybe early trauma from before we adopted her, but nothing they've tried helps much. So Thomas built her a room. A secret room, he says. He's been working on it for months, spending every spare dollar on materials. He's closed off part of the hallway upstairs, made it look like wall, but it's actually a door. Behind it, he's building a space just for Emma. Soundproofed, he says. Safe. I want to believe it's a good thing. Thomas loves Emma so much, Michelle. He'd do anything for her, but I'm worried he's becoming obsessed. He works on the room every night, won't let me see it until it's finished. Says it has to be perfect. Emma's starting to sense something's wrong. She asks why Daddy's always busy, why there are strange sounds in the walls at night. And the money. God, the money. We can't afford this, but Thomas keeps buying materials. Special insulation, special locks. Things I don't even understand. Our savings are gone. We're barely making the mortgage. When I try to talk to him about it, he gets defensive. Says I don't understand how important this is. Says Emma needs protection. Protection from what? That's what scares me. What does Thomas think is going to happen to our daughter that she needs a hidden room? Michelle, I think the stress is getting to him. The adoption was so hard, and Emma has been challenging, and maybe it's all too much. Maybe he's not thinking clearly. I don't know what to do. If I push too hard, Thomas shuts down. If I don't push at all, this just continues. Meanwhile, Emma's room, the room everyone can see, sits half-finished because all his energy goes into this secret project. I'm not sending this letter. I'm just writing it to put my thoughts somewhere. Maybe I'll read it later and realize I'm overreacting. Maybe this room will actually help Emma, and I'll feel foolish for doubting Thomas. Maybe. The letter ended there. Mid-thought, as if Sarah had been interrupted or simply run out of words. Ray and Micah stood in the hallway, the pages hanging between them like evidence of something they didn't quite understand yet. There's a room, Micah said slowly. A secret room in this house. Somewhere up here. Ray looked at the hollow section of wall with new certainty. Behind this wall, probably. He closed off part of the hallway, made it look seamless. For Emma, because she was scared. Micah's voice was quiet. Dad, that's kind of... I know. Ray folded the letter carefully. Could be a father trying to help his daughter. Could be something else. Can't tell from just this. We have to find it, right? The room? Ray nodded. Yeah, we have to find it. They spent the next hour examining the hollow section of wall, looking for any sign of an entrance. The drywall appeared seamless, painted the same dingy beige as the rest of the hallway. No visible seams, no hardware, nothing to indicate a door existed. It has to open somehow, Micah said, frustrated. He couldn't have sealed himself in. Unless the entrance is from inside one of the bedrooms. Ray went into the back bedroom, examined the wall that should back up to the hollow space. But this side was covered in that old floral wallpaper, apparently untouched for decades. They were about to give up for the night when Ray noticed something odd about the wallpaper pattern. In one small section, about 3 feet off the floor, the flowers didn't quite align. The pattern was off by maybe half an inch, subtle enough to miss unless you were looking carefully. Ray pressed against that section. The wallpaper dimpled slightly, as if there was give underneath. He pushed harder and felt something click. A section of wall, roughly 2 feet wide and 6 feet tall, swung inward an inch. Not much, just enough to reveal that it wasn't wall at all. It was a door, perfectly concealed. The wallpaper applied to its surface to match the surrounding wall. Ray pulled on the edge. The door opened smoothly on concealed hinges, swinging into darkness. A smell wafted out. Stale air, undisturbed for years, carrying the faint scent of something sweet and sad. Micah grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a small room. Maybe 10 feet by 12 feet. No windows. Walls painted a soft yellow that might have been cheerful once. And inside, perfectly preserved, a child's sanctuary. Ray stepped through the hidden doorway first, his phone's flashlight sweeping across a space that felt frozen in time. The room was small but carefully arranged, every item placed with obvious intention. The walls were painted that soft yellow, and someone, Thomas, presumably, had stenciled white clouds near the ceiling, as if trying to bring sky into a windowless space. A twin bed sat against the far wall, made up with a faded purple comforter decorated with stars. Beside it, a small wooden nightstand held a lamp shaped like a crescent moon. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with children's books, Little House on the Prairie, Anne of Green Gables, Harry Potter books, all the volumes. A wooden toy chest sat beneath the shelves, its lid closed. But it was the walls that held Ray's attention. Every surface not occupied by furniture was covered in children's drawings, each one carefully taped in place. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, creating a collage of a child's inner world. Micah entered behind his father, his own phone adding light to the space. "Jesus," he whispered. "This is Emma's room," Ray finished. "The secret one." They moved slowly through the space, careful not to disturb anything, as if Emma herself might walk in at any moment and find them trespassing. The air felt heavy with abandonment, with the weight of a place that had meant everything to someone and then been sealed away and forgotten. Ray examined the drawings on the walls, watching them tell a story in crayon and marker. The ones nearest the door were cheerful. Houses with smoking chimneys, smiling families, flowers and rainbows. Each one dated in a child's careful hand. The earliest were from 1995, when Emma would have been about 8. But as Ray moved around the room, following the chronological progression, the drawings changed. The colors became darker. The smiling families disappeared, replaced by lone figures. Houses became prisons with barred windows. Flowers wilted on their stems. One drawing, dated March 1998, showed a house. This house, recognizable by its shape, with most of it colored in cheerful yellow. But one section, a small square on the upper floor, was colored solid black. Beside it, in careful letters, "My safe place." "Look at this," Micah said quietly. He was standing by the nightstand, looking at a framed photograph. Ray joined him. The photo showed Emma, older than Inna, the Polaroid they'd found. Maybe 11 or 12. She sat on the front porch of the house, hugging her knees, staring at the camera without smiling. Her eyes held something ancient, something no child should carry. Beside the photo was a music box, delicate and obviously treasured. Ray picked it up carefully, examined the engraving on the bottom. "For Emma, love always, Grandma Jean." He wound the key. The mechanism released a haunting lullaby, tinny and beautiful, filling the small room with sound. Micah flinched at the noise, as if they'd woken something that should stay sleeping. Ray closed the music box, silence returning. He set it back on the nightstand, exactly where it had been. "This isn't right," Micah said. "I mean, it's a nice room. He clearly tried to make it special for her. But hiding your kid in a secret room? That's not normal, Dad." "No," Ray agreed. "It's not." So what was he protecting her from? That was the question. Ray opened the toy chest, found it filled with stuffed animals and games, all carefully arranged, as if everything in this room was preserved, maintained, loved. Thomas hadn't built this space to harm Emma. He'd built it to shelter her. But from what? Ray noticed a small wooden dresser in the corner he'd initially missed. The top drawer was slightly open. He pulled it fully, found it empty except for a single composition notebook, the kind elementary school kids used. He opened the notebook. The inside cover had Emma's name written in crayon. Emma Rose Carver. Private journal. Do not read. Ray hesitated, then kept reading. The journal was dense with a child's writing, entries dating from 1996 to early 1999. The early entries were mundane. School, friends, complaints about homework. But later, entries turned darker. November 3rd, 1997. Daddy finished my special room today. It's so pretty with the yellow walls and clouds. He says I can come here whenever I need to feel safe. I asked safe from what? He just hugged me and said safe from bad dreams. January 15th, 1998. Mom and Dad had another fight about money. Mom says Daddy spends too much on the room, but Daddy says it's important. I don't understand why I need 2 rooms. My regular room is fine. April 22nd, 1998. Uncle Marcus came to visit. I hid in my special room. Daddy said that's what it's for. Mom doesn't know. She thinks I was at Sarah's house. Uncle Marcus asked where I was. I heard him through the wall. His voice sounds like spiders. Ray stopped reading, his chest tight. Uncle Marcus. He flipped forward, looking for more mentions. July 8th, 1998. Mom's sister, Aunt Michelle, came with Uncle Marcus. I stayed in my special room the whole time. Daddy brought me food. He says Marcus doesn't know about the room. That's good. I don't want Marcus to find me. His hands are wrong. October 12th, 1998. Marcus came alone. Daddy made me go to my special room before Marcus got here. I heard them talking through the wall. Marcus asked if I was scared of him. Daddy said I was just shy. But I'm not shy. I'm afraid. There's a difference. Ray's hands were shaking. He passed the notebook to Micah, who read the entries in growing horror. Dad, Micah said slowly, this isn't about nightmares or anxiety. Thomas was protecting Emma from her uncle, from someone specific. Ray sat down hard on the small bed, the springs creaking. All the pieces were rearranging themselves in his mind. The secret room, the obsessive construction, Sarah's worried letter about Thomas's behavior. Thomas wasn't losing his mind. He was doing exactly what any father would do if he believed his daughter was in danger. We need to keep reading, Ray said, taking the notebook back. He flipped to the last entry, dated December 3rd, 1999. They found me. I don't know how, but they did. I was in my safe room like always when Marcus visits, but he brought someone with him. A lady. She said she needed to check the house because someone reported us. Daddy tried to stop her, but she had papers. She found the door. She made me come out. Marcus smiled at me like he won. The lady asked lots of questions. Am I scared? Do Mom and Dad hurt me? I said no, but she didn't believe me. She says hiding kids in secret rooms is abuse. But I wanted to be in there. It kept me safe from... The entry ended abruptly mid-sentence, as if Emma had been interrupted. There were no more entries after that date. Ray closed the notebook, set it on the bed beside him. The room suddenly felt suffocating despite being carefully ventilated. He could see the small air ducts Thomas had installed in the ceiling, connecting to the main system. What happened to her? Micah asked. After they found the room? I don't know, but I can guess. Ray stood, examining the room with new eyes. Child services got called. Someone reported the Carvers for having a hidden room. When authorities found it, they probably saw what that lady saw, a kid being hidden away, parents acting suspicious. They wouldn't have understood the context. But Emma said she wanted to be here. She felt safe. Wouldn't matter. Secret rooms, hidden children, that looks bad no matter the reason. Ray moved to the door, looked back at the carefully constructed sanctuary. Thomas built this out of love and desperation, and it probably destroyed his family. They left the room, closing the concealed door carefully behind them. The click as it latched felt final, like sealing away something that should never have been disturbed. Downstairs, Ray made coffee while Micah sat at the kitchen table, processing what they'd found. The house felt different now, weighted with knowledge. This wasn't just an abandoned property anymore. It was the scene of a family's unraveling, the physical evidence of love twisted into something others could weaponize. We need to find out what happened to them, Micah said finally. To Emma and her parents. We can't just leave it like this. Ray agreed. But the local library had already given up its limited information. He needed something more, someone who might remember. The next morning, Saturday, Ray drove into Nashville proper, to the general store that seemed to serve as the town's hub. An older man worked behind the counter, maybe 70, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent their life outdoors. "Help you?" the man asked. "Maybe. I'm looking for information about a family that used to live out on Oak Ridge Road. The Carvers. They were there in the 90s. The man's expression shifted, became guarded. "Carvers. Yeah, I remember them. That was a bad situation." "Bad how? You a reporter or something?" "No, I bought their old house. Found some things that made me curious about what happened." The man studied Ray for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Thomas Carver was a good man, worked construction, kept to himself mostly. His wife Sarah was quiet, real gentle, and the little girl, Emma, I think, sweet kid, seemed nervous around people. What happened to them? There was some kind of investigation. Late 99, maybe early 2000. Child Services came around asking questions. Rumors started flying. Some people said the Carvers were abusing the girl, keeping her locked up. Others said it was all a misunderstanding. Town was divided. Was there a trial? Don't think so. Family just disappeared one day, left everything and took off. House sat empty until the bank foreclosed a few years later. The man shook his head. Shame, really. Felt like everybody rushed to judgment without knowing the full story. You think Thomas was innocent? I think. The man paused, choosing words carefully. I think sometimes good people end up in impossible situations, and sometimes the systems meant to protect kids don't see the whole picture. That's all I'll say about it. Ray thanked him and left, the man's words sitting heavy in his chest. Back at the house, he found Micah had returned to the secret room, sitting on Emma's bed, reading through the books on her shelves. "Find anything?" Ray asked from the doorway. "Just a kid's life. She liked the same books I did at that age, had the same fears, same hopes." Micah closed the book he was holding. She was real, Dad. Not just some mystery. She was a real kid who needed help and maybe didn't get it. That night, Ray couldn't sleep. He lay in his sleeping bag in the living room, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Emma Carver. Thinking about a father who'd built a secret room because he didn't know what else to do. Thinking about how the same love that drove Ray to fight for custody had driven Thomas to increasingly desperate measures. And thinking about Marcus. Uncle Marcus, whose voice sounded like spiders, whose hands were wrong, who had somehow been involved in the discovery of the room, who was Linda's brother. Ray's phone buzzed. A text from Linda, sent at 1 a.m. Need to talk about Thanksgiving plans. Micah should spend it with family. Family. The word felt poisonous. Ray thought about Marcus at family gatherings, asking too many questions, making Micah uncomfortable. Thought about Emma hiding in her safe room whenever Marcus visited. He texted back, "We'll make our own plans." Her response was immediate. "Don't be difficult, Ray. Marcus wants to see his nephew." Marcus wants to see his nephew. The words made Ray's skin crawl. He turned off his phone without responding and lay in the darkness, listening to the house settle around him. Upstairs, hidden behind a false wall, Emma's room waited. A sanctuary that had become a prison. A father's love turned into evidence against him. Ray wouldn't let history repeat itself. Whatever had happened to the Carvers, whatever danger Emma had been hiding from, Ray would figure it out. And if Marcus was part of that story, if he was the threat Thomas had been protecting against, then Ray needed to know, because the man who made Emma feel unsafe was Linda's brother. The man who wanted access to Micah. Ray had fought for custody on instinct, on some gut feeling that his son needed protection. Now, lying in a house that held secrets about another child who'd needed protection, Ray wondered if his instincts had been trying to tell him something all along. Ray returned to the hidden room Sunday morning with purpose. If Emma's journal held clues about what happened, there might be more. He searched methodically, checking under the bed, behind the bookshelf, inside the toy chest. Micah helped, both of them moving with the quiet intensity of people hunting for truth. It was Micah who found the second piece of evidence, a loose floorboard near the closet door. Beneath it, wrapped in a plastic bag to protect it from moisture, was a leather-bound journal. Adult handwriting on the inside cover, Thomas J. Carver, private. Ray sat cross-legged on the floor, Micah beside him, and opened the journal. The entries began in June 1995, shortly after the family had moved into the house. The early pages were mundane, notes about home repairs, costs, timelines for projects. Thomas wrote in spare, practical prose, listing problems and solutions. Bathroom needs new subfloor. Yes-tour costs $300. Check local sawmill for deals on lumber. But around page 15, the entries shifted tone. November 8, 1995. Emma had another nightmare last night. Third one this week. She won't tell us what they're about, just cries and says the bad man is coming. Sarah thinks it's adjustment issues from before the adoption. The agency said Emma had a rough first 6 years, but they couldn't tell us specifics. Confidentiality. How are we supposed to help a child when we don't know what we're helping her heal from? Ray flipped forward, watching Thomas's growing concern manifest in increasingly worried entries. March 3rd, 1996. Sarah's brother-in-law visited today. Marcus. Emma hid in her room the entire time. Wouldn't come out even when we called her for dinner. When I asked why later, she said Marcus's eyes were wrong. She couldn't explain what she meant. Sarah says Emma's just shy around new people, but this felt different. The kid was genuinely frightened. August 17, 1996. Marcus visited again. Brought his wife, Michelle. Emma ran upstairs the moment they arrived. When I went to check on her later, I found her hiding in her closet, hands over her ears. She was shaking. I asked what was wrong, and she whispered, "He knows things about me. Bad things." I asked who. Marcus. She nodded. Then she said something that chilled me. "He says he knew me before, but I don't remember him. Why don't I remember?" Ray paused, exchanged a glance with Micah. The implications were forming, ugly and unavoidable. December 2nd, 1996. I talked to Sarah about my concerns regarding Marcus. She got defensive immediately, said I was being paranoid, that Marcus is her sister's husband and a respected accountant. She thinks I'm looking for problems where none exist. But I can't shake the feeling that Emma's fear is specific, not general anxiety. The way she reacts to him, it's visceral, instinctive, like a burned child avoiding fire. The entries became more frequent, more detailed. Thomas documented every interaction, every reaction, building a case that no one would believe. April 15, 1997. I've made a decision. If the adults in Emma's life won't take her fears seriously, I will. I'm going to build her a safe space. Somewhere she can retreat to when Marcus visits, where she feels protected. Sarah thinks I'm overreacting, but she didn't see Emma's face yesterday when Michelle called to say they were coming over. The kid went white as a sheet. She asked me if she could go somewhere Marcus couldn't find her. I promised her I'd make sure she could. From there, the journal became a construction log. Thomas detailed his plans for the hidden room, how he'd reconfigure the upstairs hallway, where he'd source materials, how he'd make the door invisible. The entries showed obsessive attention to detail, soundproofing, ventilation, a lock that only worked from inside the room so Emma could control her own safety. September 23, 1997. The room is nearly finished. Emma saw it for the first time today. She cried and hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. She said, "Now he can't get me." Sarah doesn't understand. She sees the money we've spent, the time I've invested, and thinks I'm enabling Emma's anxiety instead of helping her face it. But you can't force a child to face down her demons when those demons might be real. Ray's hands tightened on the journal. Every entry confirmed what he'd begun to suspect. Thomas hadn't been crazy or controlling. He'd been a father responding to his daughter's genuine terror, doing the only thing he could think of when no one else would help. November 12th, 1997. Marcus came by unexpectedly today. Sarah was at work. It was just me and Emma. I put her in the safe room before I answered the door. Marcus asked where Emma was. I said she was at a friend's house. He smiled. God, I hate that smile. And said, "That's too bad. I haven't seen my favorite niece in months. Sarah says she's been avoiding me." I told him Emma's just at an awkward age, doesn't want to hang around adults. He looked past me into the house and said, "Kids shouldn't hide from family. It's not healthy." The way he said it felt like a threat. February 8th, 1998. I tried to talk to Sarah again about Marcus. Told her Emma's fear is consistent, specific, and worth taking seriously. Sarah broke down. Said her sister Michelle is her only family, that Marcus has been good to them over the years, helped them financially when things were tight. She begged me not to make accusations I couldn't prove, said it would destroy her relationship with her sister. I'm trapped. I can't protect Emma without tearing apart Sarah's family, so I keep building the room, making it safer, making it somewhere Emma can escape to when I can't make the threat go away. The entries through 1998 and into 1999 showed Thomas's increasing isolation. Sarah pulled away, spending more time with her sister, perhaps trying to prove to herself that Marcus was fine, that her husband's suspicions were groundless. Emma retreated further into herself, using the secret room not just when Marcus visited, but whenever anxiety overwhelmed her. And Thomas worked alone, maintaining the house and the hidden sanctuary, documenting everything with the desperate hope that someday someone would understand. Then came the entry that changed everything. December 3rd, 1999. It's over. They found the room. Marcus brought a social worker to the house, claimed he was concerned about Emma's welfare, said Sarah had confided in Michelle that I'd been acting strange, spending money obsessively, that Emma seemed frightened of me. The social worker had a warrant to inspect the house. I couldn't stop her. When she found the hidden room, the way she looked at me, like I was a monster. Emma was inside. She tried to explain that she wanted to be there, that it made her feel safe, but the social worker didn't listen. She saw a child hidden in a secret room and jumped to conclusions. They took Emma. Right then, wouldn't even let us pack her things properly. Sarah was hysterical. The social worker said they were placing Emma in emergency protective custody pending investigation. Marcus stood on the lawn while they took her away. I swear to God he was smiling. This was his plan all along. Make me look unstable, make the room look like abuse, take Emma away from the one place she felt protected. And it worked. Ray's throat was tight. He flipped to the next entry. December 15th, 1999. Emma's been gone 12 days. We've had 2 supervised visits. She barely speaks, just sits there looking hollow. The caseworker says she's being evaluated by psychologists. They're asking her about the room, about why she was hidden, about whether we hurt her. She's 12 years old, and they're treating her like evidence. Sarah won't speak to me. Blames me for building the room, for creating this situation. Says if I'd just let Emma face her fears like a normal parent, none of this would have happened. She doesn't understand that Emma's fears were valid. Or maybe she does understand and can't bear to accept it, because accepting it means accepting what Marcus might be. December 20th, 1999. The investigation is expanding. They're looking into Emma's adoption records, trying to find evidence of prior trauma that might explain her behavior. But those records are sealed. The agency won't cooperate. Meanwhile, Marcus has convinced Michelle to make a statement saying I was always unstable, jealous of Marcus's relationship with Sarah's family, possibly delusional. My own wife won't contradict her sister's husband. I'm losing everything. The house, my marriage, my daughter. All because I tried to protect a child from a threat no one else would acknowledge. The final entry was dated January 4, 2000. Emma came back today. She was gone 3 weeks. They found her at a gas station 30 miles away, disoriented and unable to explain where she'd been or how she got there. She won't speak at all now, just stares. The doctors say it's trauma, possibly dissociative episode. They're recommending residential treatment. Sarah can't look at either of us. The house feels like a tomb. I tried to go into Emma's safe room yesterday to clean it out, to destroy the evidence of my failure, but I couldn't. That room was the one thing I did right. It kept her safe when she needed safety. That it was used against us doesn't change what it meant. We're leaving. Sarah's sister has connections in Chicago, can help us get Emma into a good program. We're going to sell the house, start over somewhere Emma doesn't have to see this room or Marcus or anything that reminds her of what happened. I'm writing this down because someday maybe someone will understand. I wasn't a monster. I was just a father who didn't know how else to protect his child. If you're reading this, if you found this journal, take care of this house. It holds a lot of pain, but it also holds love. Everything I did here, I did for Emma. Remember that. Ray closed the journal, his vision blurred. Beside him, Micah was crying silently, tears running down his face. They sat in Emma's hidden room, surrounded by her drawings and books and the artifacts of a childhood stolen by adults who couldn't see what was right in front of them. "Dad," Micah said finally, his voice rough. Marcus's mom's brother. "I know. He asks about me at family stuff, wants to know where we live, what we're doing. Mom always tells him." Ray's jaw tightened. "Does he make you uncomfortable? Has he ever—" "No, nothing specific. But he watches me weird. Asks questions that feel too personal. Mom says he's just interested, that family should care about each other." Micah wiped his eyes. But reading this, thinking about Emma, "Dad, what if that's why you fought so hard for custody? What if you knew something was wrong, even if you couldn't name it?" Ray pulled his son close, held him tight. "I need you to tell me the truth. Has Marcus ever touched you inappropriately? Ever said anything that made you feel unsafe?" "No, I swear. It's just the way he looks at me sometimes, like he's waiting for something. I always made sure I wasn't alone with him at family stuff. Is that weird? Did I know somehow? That's called instinct, and you should always trust it." Ray released Micah, looked him in the eye. "We're not going to any family events where Marcus will be. I don't care what your mother says, and we're going to figure out what happened to Emma Carver, because if Marcus did something to her, if he's the reason she needed that room—" Ray's phone rang. Linda's name on the screen. He answered, keeping his voice neutral. "Linda. We need to talk. Today, I'm coming there." "Coming where?" "Don't play games, Ray. Micah's school called, changed his address on file to Nashville, Indiana. So you did move. You moved him to God knows where without telling me. That's a violation of the custody agreement." Ray's stomach sank. He'd updated the school address for emergency purposes. Hadn't thought about the information going to Linda. "It's not a violation. I'm allowed to change residence." "Not without informing me. And certainly not without making sure the new place is appropriate for a child." Her voice was sharp, building to something. "Marcus did some research. Apparently you bought a foreclosed property. A condemned wreck. You're living in a construction site with our son. It's being renovated. It's fine. Marcus says the property has a history. Says a family lived there who had their child taken by CPS because they were hiding her in a secret room. Is that true? Ray closed his eyes. Marcus. Of course it was Marcus digging into the property records, finding the one piece of information that could be weaponized. That situation was complicated. I'm filing for emergency custody modification tomorrow morning. Marcus is helping me with the paperwork. He's agreed to serve as a character witness about your unstable choices. And Ray, I'm going to win, because you've given me everything I need. She hung up. Ray stood in Emma's hidden room, holding his phone, feeling history fold in on itself. Marcus had orchestrated Emma's removal from her safe place. Now he was orchestrating Micah's removal too. The pattern was clear, the threat was real, and Ray had just run out of time to prove it. Ray didn't sleep that night. He sat in the hidden room with Thomas's journal open in his lap, rereading entries by LED lantern light, looking for anything he might have missed. Some detail that could help him understand, that could give him leverage. Micah had eventually gone to his own room, emotionally exhausted. But Ray couldn't rest. His mind spun with connections, implications, the weight of knowing something terrible without being able to prove it. At 3 a.m., he returned to the toy chest in Emma's room, searching more thoroughly. He removed stuffed animals and board games methodically, checking for anything hidden beneath. At the bottom, under a deflated beach ball, his fingers found something that felt wrong, a seam in the wooden bottom that shouldn't be there. Ray pried carefully with his utility knife. The false bottom lifted out, revealing a shallow compartment beneath. Inside, a small locked box, metal about the size of a hardcover book. The lock was old, probably easy to break, but Ray hesitated. This felt like Emma's last secret, her final privacy. Breaking it open felt like violation. But Thomas's final journal entry echoed in his mind. If you're reading this, if you found this journal, take care of this house. Ray broke the lock. Inside the box, he found a VHS tape in a plastic case. Someone had written on the label in neat handwriting, Emma's Truth, Deck 1999. Ray stared at the tape, his heart pounding. VHS in 1999 wasn't unusual, but the label suggested something official, something recorded with purpose. He needed to see what was on it, but he didn't own a VCR. Nobody did anymore. He waited until Sunday morning, then drove to the thrift store in Bloomington, the one that dealt in obsolete electronics. $20 bought him a dusty VCR that the clerk promised probably worked. Ray loaded it into his truck and drove back to the house, where Micah was awake and eating cereal standing up in the kitchen. "What's that?" Micah asked, nodding at the VCR. "Something I need to see. Something we both need to see, probably." Ray set the box on the kitchen counter. "I found a tape hidden in Emma's room, labeled Emma's Truth." Micah set down his cereal bowl. "When you say Emma's Truth, I don't know what it is. But whatever's on here, someone wanted it preserved. Probably Sarah or Thomas, documenting something." They set up the VCR in the living room, connecting it to the small portable TV Ray had bought for $19 at a yard sale. The screen filled with static and tracking lines when Ray pushed the tape in. He pressed play, and both of them sat on the floor to watch. The image resolved slowly. A woman appeared on screen, sitting in what looked like a living room. This living room, Ray realized, recognizing the brick fireplace in the background. The woman was in her early 30s, thin, with dark circles under her eyes, and hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Sarah Carver. "My name is Sarah Margaret Carver," she said, her voice tired but steady. "Today is December 15th, 1999. I'm recording this because no one will believe what I'm about to say, and I need there to be a record. Somewhere. For someone." Sarah looked off camera, nodded at someone, then back to the lens. "Emma, honey, come sit with me." A girl entered the frame. Emma, 12 years old, thin and pale, moving with the careful rigidity of someone who'd learned not to take up too much space. She sat beside her mother on the couch, staring at the camera with hollow eyes. Sarah put an arm around her daughter. Emma has been gone for 3 weeks. She came back to us 4 days ago. She won't speak about where she was or what happened, but she's agreed to let me tell her story. Emma, if at any point you want me to stop, just squeeze my hand. Okay. Emma nodded slightly, her expression unchanging. Sarah took a deep breath. 2 years ago, my daughter started showing signs of severe anxiety, nightmares, fear of certain people, reluctance to leave the house. My husband, Thomas, believed Emma was afraid of someone specific, my brother-in-law, Marcus Brennan. I didn't want to believe him. Marcus is married to my sister Michelle. He's a successful accountant, respected in the community. The idea that he could be dangerous seemed impossible. But Emma's fear was consistent. Every time Marcus visited, she would hide. She begged Thomas to make her a safe place where Marcus couldn't find her. So Thomas built a secret room in our house, a place Emma could go when she felt threatened. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. I thought my husband was being overprotective, enabling anxiety instead of helping Emma face it. But 3 weeks ago, after child services found the room and took Emma away, I learned the truth. She paused, composing herself. Emma, I'm going to tell them now. Squeeze if you need me to stop. Emma squeezed her mother's hand once, then released it. Sarah continued. Emma was adopted when she was 6 years old. The agency told us very little about her background, just that she'd been in foster care since birth, had been through multiple placements, and had some behavioral issues. What they didn't tell us, what was buried in sealed records, was why she'd been moved so many times. Sarah's jaw tightened. When Emma disappeared for 3 weeks, it triggered a broader investigation. The police had to access her adoption records to rule out things like her trying to find birth family. What they found, what they finally shared with us, is that Emma had been removed from 3 previous foster placements due to reports of suspected abuse. The abuse was never proven, but the pattern was consistent. Each time Emma would withdraw, stop speaking, show signs of trauma. And each time the foster families reported that she seemed specifically frightened of male visitors to the home. Ray felt ice spreading through his chest. Beside him, Micah had gone completely still. Sarah continued. The adoption agency should have disclosed this. They didn't because it would have made Emma harder to place. But it explains everything. Emma's fear wasn't irrational. She was responding to something from her past, some trauma so deep she couldn't articulate it. And Marcus, Sarah's voice hardened. 3 days before Emma disappeared, Marcus came to our house. He brought a social worker with him, claimed he was concerned about Emma's welfare. He'd convinced Michelle to tell the social worker about Thomas's obsessive behavior and the money we'd spent on house modifications. The social worker found the hidden room and immediately assumed abuse. But here's what I didn't know until yesterday. Here's what the police investigation revealed. Sarah looked directly into the camera. Marcus Brennan worked for the adoption agency that placed Emma with us. Not as an accountant. That came later. In 1994, when Emma was placed in her 3rd foster home, Marcus was a caseworker for the agency. He had direct access to her file, direct contact with her foster families. He knew everything about her history, her placements, her vulnerabilities. Ray's hands had gone numb. He was barely breathing. When Emma finally spoke to the police about where she'd been for 3 weeks, she said she ran away because she overheard Marcus talking to the social worker. She heard him say, "Now we can help her properly." Emma thought help meant what help had meant before. She ran rather than let that happen again. Sarah pulled Emma closer. My daughter has been terrorized for years by a man who knew exactly what would trigger her, who used his position and access to identify a vulnerable child and integrate himself into her life. Thomas saw it. Thomas tried to protect her. And I didn't believe him until it was too late. Sarah wiped her eyes roughly. I'm recording this because Marcus is still free. The police can't prove he did anything to Emma specifically. She can't remember details, just feelings, fears, impressions. Without concrete evidence, it's his word against a traumatized child's intuition. And Marcus is smart. He covered his tracks, left the agency years ago, became an accountant, built a respectable life. When he saw Emma being adopted by his wife's sister, he must have thought it was perfect. Access to a child he'd already groomed, already controlled, wrapped in the legitimacy of family. Sarah looked at Emma, then back to the camera. We're leaving Brown County, going somewhere Marcus can't find us. Emma needs treatment, therapy, years of healing. But I'm making this record so that someday, if anything happens to us, someone will know. Marcus Brennan is dangerous. He targets vulnerable children, and he's so good at hiding it that even his own wife doesn't see it. Thomas was right. The room wasn't crazy. It was love. And I'm sorry I didn't see that until we'd already lost everything. Sarah reached forward, and the video cut to static. Ray sat frozen, the white noise filling the room. Beside him, Micah was shaking, his face drained of color. That's Mom's brother, Micah whispered. Dad, that's Uncle Marcus worked with kids. He had access. Ray's mind was racing, connecting pieces with terrible clarity. Marcus's interest in Micah at family gatherings, his questions, his attention, the way he studied people as Micah had described it. Linda's trust in her brother, her willingness to let Marcus help with the custody fight. Marcus suggesting he serve as a character witness, Marcus researching the property, Marcus helping Linda build a case. And Linda. Did she know? Had Michelle known about her husband? Or had she been blind like Sarah had been? Ray thought about Linda's defensive reactions whenever Ray had expressed discomfort with Marcus. Her insistence that Ray was being paranoid, that Marcus was just family taking an interest. History was repeating itself with terrifying precision. Ray stood abruptly, pacing the room. We have to find Emma. She's 37 now. If we can find her, if she's willing to talk about what happened. Would she even remember us? Micah asked. Would she want to dredge up all this trauma? Maybe not, but we have to try. Ray grabbed his laptop, started searching. Emma Rose Carver, born 1987, adopted 1993. He searched for hours, cross-referencing public records, social media, anything that might point to an adult woman who'd once been a frightened girl in rural Indiana. Most trails led nowhere. The wrong age, wrong background, wrong state. Emma could have changed her name, could be anywhere, could have no digital presence at all if she was protecting her privacy. It was Micah who found her, using a different approach. Dad, look at this. He'd searched for Thomas Carver's obituary, figuring if Emma had reconnected with her father later in life, there might be a trail. And there it was. Thomas John Carver, died 2018, survived by daughter Emma Sinclair of Portland, Oregon. Sinclair. Emma had changed her name, probably after marriage, but she'd maintained contact with Thomas. Ray felt a rush of hope mixed with grief. Thomas had gotten at least some reconciliation before he died. Finding Emma Sinclair in Portland proved easier. She had a limited social media presence, a profile picture showing a woman in her late 30s with kind eyes and Emma's distinctive smile. Her profile listed her as a trauma counselor specializing in childhood abuse. Of course, Emma had turned her pain into purpose. Ray drafted an email carefully, explaining who he was, what he'd found in the house, and why he needed to speak with her. He attached photos of the hidden room, of Thomas's journal, of the VHS tape label. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. The response came 6 hours later, while Ray and Micah were attempting to eat dinner neither of them wanted. "Mr. Holler, I never thought I'd hear from anyone connected to that house. Yes, I'm Emma Carver, or I was. I'd be willing to speak with you, though I'm not sure how I can help. What happened to my family destroyed us. My mother died of cancer in 2005. Never really recovered from the stress. My father and I reconciled before he passed, but those years were hard. If you found evidence that might finally prove what Marcus did, I want to help. But I need to know why. Why does this matter to you?" Ray wrote back, immediately, explaining everything, his custody battle. Micah, Linda's relationship to Marcus, the threats of legal action, the way history seemed to be repeating itself. He laid it all out, raw and desperate. Emma's response came an hour later. "Call me. Now." Ray dialed the number she'd provided, his hands shaking. Emma answered on the first ring. "Mr. Holler." Her voice was warm but carried traces of old pain. "I need you to listen very carefully. Marcus Brennan is dangerous in ways most people never understand. He doesn't leave evidence. He grooms families, not just children. He makes people trust him so completely that when something feels wrong, they blame themselves instead of him." "Did he—" Ray couldn't finish the question. "I don't have clear memories. Just feelings, impressions, terror I couldn't explain. My therapist says that's common with early childhood trauma. The mind protects itself by burying what it can't process. But I know Marcus was part of what happened before my adoption, and I know he tried to maintain access to me after. My father understood that even when my mother didn't. The room he built saved my life, Mr. Holler. It gave me a space where I felt safe enough to exist. Your mother's video, I have a copy. It's the only concrete evidence that exists connecting Marcus to anything inappropriate. But it's not enough for criminal prosecution. Just a traumatized mother's accusations on an old VHS tape. I've tried to do something with it over the years, but without my specific testimony about abuse, which I can't give because I don't remember details, it goes nowhere." Ray's hope deflated. "So we can't stop him." "I didn't say that." Emma's voice hardened. "I've spent 20 years studying people like Marcus. I know how they operate, and more importantly, I know he doesn't stop. If he's focused on your son the way he focused on me, he's playing a long game. The question is whether your ex-wife would protect Micah if she knew the truth. I don't know. Linda trusts Marcus completely. He's helping her build a custody case against me." "Of course he is. It's the same pattern. Isolate the protective parent, discredit them, gain access to the child through the other parent's trust." Emma paused. "Mr. Holler, I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to write a statement about what happened to me, what my father discovered, and what I believe about Marcus's methods. It won't be enough for court. Hearsay, too old, too vague. But it might be enough to make your ex-wife question her brother. Sometimes all it takes is one crack in the foundation of trust. You'd do that, even though it means revisiting everything. I'm a trauma counselor because I know what it's like to not be believed, to have the adults who should protect you fail because they can't see the threat. Your son has you, someone who sees the pattern, who's willing to fight. Emma Carver didn't have that until it was almost too late. I can help make sure Micah Holler doesn't end up like I did." Ray's throat was too tight to speak. Micah, listening on speakerphone, wiped his eyes. "Thank you," Ray managed finally. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly. Marcus won't let this happen without a fight. And your ex-wife, she's going to have to choose between believing her brother or protecting her son. That's not an easy choice when someone spent years building trust. What do I do until then? Document everything. Keep Micah safe. And Mr. Holler, trust your instincts. My father's mistake was doubting himself, letting others convince him he was paranoid. You're not paranoid. You're seeing what's actually there. They talked for another hour, Emma providing details about Marcus's patterns, warning signs, methods. By the time they hung up, Ray had pages of notes and a concrete plan. Emma would send her statement within 48 hours. Ray would present it to Linda privately, away from Marcus, giving her a chance to see the truth before the custody hearing. It was a thin hope, but it was more than Ray had had that morning. He looked at Micah, sitting beside him in the house that had held Emma's secrets for 20 years. "You okay?" "No," Micah said honestly. "But I'm glad we found her. I'm glad someone believed her father. Thomas Carver was a good man in an impossible situation. Like you." Ray pulled his son close, held him in the wreckage of someone else's dream house, and hoped like hell history wouldn't repeat itself. Emma's statement arrived by email Tuesday morning, a 9-page document detailing everything she could remember, everything her father had documented, and everything she'd learned in 2 decades of studying trauma and predatory behavior. Ray printed it at the library, read it 3 times, and felt his resolve solidify into something harder than determination. The custody hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Ray had 8 days to either convince Linda to withdraw her motion or prepare for a legal battle he probably couldn't win. The hidden room, which Thomas had built out of love, would be used against Ray just as it had been used against Thomas. Marcus would testify about Ray's poor judgment, his unstable living situation, his reckless financial decisions, and Linda, believing her brother, would paint Ray as exactly the kind of father who shouldn't have custody, unless Ray could crack her foundation of trust first. He called Linda Wednesday morning during his lunch break at Henderson's. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice clipped. "What do you want, Ray?" "I need to meet with you, face to face, without lawyers, without Marcus, just the 2 of us." "Why would I do that?" "Because we were married for 8 years. Because you know me well enough to know when something's genuinely serious, and because what I need to tell you concerns our son's safety in ways you haven't considered." Linda was silent for a long moment. "This better not be some manipulation." "It's not. I have information you need to see. About Marcus." Another pause. "Marcus? Ray, if this is some attempt to smear my brother, it's not smearing if it's true. Linda, please. 1 hour. You pick the place. You pick the time. But you have to come alone." She agreed, finally, to meet at a coffee shop in Bloomington Thursday evening. Neutral territory, public enough that neither of them could make a scene. Ray spent Wednesday night organizing his evidence: Emma's statement, copies of Thomas's journal entries, screenshots from the video of Sarah Carver. He put everything in a folder, handling it like the explosive material it was. Thursday afternoon, Ray left work early, drove home to shower and change into the closest thing he owned to professional clothes. Micah watched him prepare with anxious eyes. "What if she doesn't believe you?" Micah asked. "Then we go to court and hope the judge sees what I see." Ray straightened his collar, met his son's gaze in the mirror. "But your mom's not stupid. She's just been trusting the wrong person. Sometimes people can change their minds when confronted with facts. And if she can't, if Marcus has her too convinced?" Ray turned to face Micah. "Then we fight anyway. That's what your grandfather Thomas should have done. Fought louder, harder, made people listen. I'm not making his mistake." The drive to Bloomington felt longer than 45 minutes. Ray arrived early, ordered coffee he didn't want, and sat at a corner table with the folder in front of him. Linda appeared exactly on time, dressed in office attire, her expression guarded. She'd lost weight since the divorce, Ray noticed. The stress had carved her down to angles. She sat across from him without ordering anything. "You have 1 hour. Talk." Ray slid the folder across the table. "I need you to read something first. Don't interrupt, don't argue. Just read." Linda opened the folder, her expression skeptical. Ray watched her face as she read Emma's statement, watched skepticism shift to confusion, then to something that might have been concern. She read through all 9 pages, then looked up. This is about Marcus. Yes. Ray, these are accusations from decades ago. Unproven accusations about someone's feelings and impressions. This doesn't prove anything. Keep reading, there's more. She flipped to the journal excerpts, reading Thomas's documented concerns. Her jaw tightened. So a man thought his daughter was afraid of someone and built a secret room. That doesn't make the fear rational. Linda, the pattern. What pattern? A child with pre-existing trauma has anxiety? That's not a pattern, that's expected behavior. And Marcus worked in social services, yes, but that doesn't make him a predator. Lots of people work with children without... Why did Emma run away? Ray interrupted. A 12-year-old girl heard Marcus talking to a social worker and ran away for 3 weeks. Why would she do that if she wasn't genuinely terrified? Because she was traumatized and irrational. Ray, I know where you're going with this, and it's insane. Marcus is my brother. I've known him my entire life. He's a good person who's always supported this family. Has he? Ray leaned forward. Think about the custody battle. Who suggested you fight for full custody instead of shared? That was my decision. Was it? Or did Marcus encourage it, point out all the ways I wasn't good enough? Build a case for you. Ray pulled out his phone, showed her his notes. Marcus has been asking about Micah for months. Where he lives, what he does, whether he feels safe with me. Why is he so invested in our custody arrangement? Because he cares about his nephew. Or because he wants access. Ray's voice was steady, calm. Linda, look at the pattern. Marcus identified Emma as vulnerable because of his position at the adoption agency. He integrated himself into her life through family connection. When her father tried to protect her, Marcus used the system to discredit him and remove the protective parent. Now he's doing the same thing with Micah, using you to remove me while positioning himself as the concerned uncle. Linda's hands were shaking slightly. You're describing my brother as a child predator based on one family's paranoid interpretations from 20 years ago. I'm describing your brother based on documented behavior and the testimony of his victim. Emma Carver is alive, Linda. She's a trauma counselor in Portland. She remembers enough to know Marcus was dangerous, and she's terrified the same thing that happened to her is being set up to happen to Micah. Linda stood abruptly. This is insane. You're grasping at straws, trying to make me doubt my own family, because you know you're going to lose custody. I came here in good faith, and you're spinning conspiracy theories. Has Marcus ever been alone with Micah? Ray asked quietly. Linda froze. What? Simple question. In all the years we've been divorced, all the family gatherings and events, has Marcus ever specifically arranged to be alone with Micah? Offered to take him somewhere, wanted one-on-one time? Linda's expression flickered. He offered to take Micah to a baseball game last summer. I said no because Micah had plans. Why did you say no, Linda? Really? Because... She stopped, her face struggling with something, because something felt off about the way he asked. Too eager, too focused on making sure it would be just the two of them. But I thought I was reading too much into it. Marcus is just enthusiastic about family, and I... She sat back down slowly, staring at the folder. Ray could see the war happening behind her eyes. Trust battling instinct. Micah says Marcus makes him uncomfortable, Ray said gently. Says he watches him weird, asks too many personal questions. I thought I was overreacting, being paranoid. But then I bought this house, found Emma's story, and realized my instincts were trying to tell me something important. Linda's hands covered her face. If you're wrong, if you're making me doubt my brother based on nothing, I'm not wrong. And deep down, you know I'm not. Ray reached across the table, stopped short of touching her. "Linda, you've known me for 15 years. You know I'm not creative enough to invent something like this. You know I don't play games with Micah's safety. I'm asking you to trust your own instincts instead of your brother's reassurances." Linda was crying now, silently, her shoulders shaking. "He's my brother, Ray. He's been there for me my whole life. After the divorce, he was the one who helped me, who told me I deserved better, who—" She looked up, horror dawning. "Oh, God. He encouraged the divorce, didn't he? He kept telling me you weren't good enough, that I should want more. I thought he was being supportive, but he was isolating the protective parent," Ray finished, "creating access to Micah by turning you against me." Linda grabbed the folder, read through everything again with new eyes. Ray sat silent, letting the evidence speak. When she finished, she looked broken. "What do I do?" she whispered. "You withdraw the custody motion, you keep Marcus away from Micah, and you talk to your sister because if Marcus did this to Emma, Michelle deserves to know what her husband is. Michelle won't believe me. She'll think I've lost my mind. Maybe, but you have to try. For her, for any other kids in Marcus's orbit." Ray paused. "And you have to testify, Linda. If Marcus tries to proceed with the custody hearing, you have to stand up in court and say you were wrong about me, wrong about him." Linda stared at him, tears still running down her face. "He'll destroy me, the family, my relationship with Michelle. Emma's father lost everything trying to protect his daughter, but he did it anyway because that's what parents do. We protect our kids even when it costs us everything." They sat in the coffee shop for 2 more hours, Linda asking questions, Ray providing answers, both of them grieving the foundation of trust that was crumbling. Linda called her lawyer from the coffee shop, instructed him to file a motion to dismiss her custody challenge. The lawyer argued, said she had a strong case, but Linda was firm. "I was wrong," she said into the phone, "about everything. Dismiss it." When she hung up, she looked at Ray with something that might have been respect. "You really bought a condemned house with your last $500 to protect him." "I bought it because I needed to build something. Turns out I was building a defense without knowing it. That room, the one Thomas built, it's still there." "Yes." "Can I see it?" Linda's voice was small. "I need to understand what Marcus was willing to destroy to get to Emma." They drove to the house in separate cars, Linda following Ray down the winding road to 1247 Oak Ridge. Micah was home, doing homework at the kitchen table. He looked up in shock when his mother walked in. "Mom?" "Hi, baby." Linda crossed to him, pulled him into a hug he awkwardly returned. "I need to see something your dad found. Then we need to talk." Ray led them both upstairs, through the bedroom, to the hidden door that still looked like seamless wall. He pressed the concealed release, and the door swung open. Linda stepped into Emma's sanctuary, and her breath caught. She moved slowly through the space, looking at the drawings, the careful decorations, the preserved childhood. She picked up the music box, wound it, listened to the lullaby with tears streaming down her face. "A father built this," she said finally, "out of love, to protect his child, and my brother used it to destroy him." "Yes," Ray said simply. Linda turned to Micah. "Has Uncle Marcus ever made you feel unsafe?" Micah glanced at his father, then back at his mother. "Not unsafe exactly. Just uncomfortable, like he was waiting for something. I always made sure other people were around when he was there." "Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me?" Micah's voice was gentle. "You trust him. Everyone trusts him. That's what makes him good at it." Linda sank onto Emma's bed, surrounded by a ghost's belongings. "I almost gave him access to you. I almost handed you to him thinking I was helping you. But you didn't," Ray said, "because when it mattered, you listened. That's what Emma's mother didn't do until it was too late. You're different." Linda looked at Ray, really looked at him, maybe for the first time since the divorce. "The house, it found you. Or I found it. Either way, we're here. And you're not letting go. Never. Linda nodded slowly, wiping her face. Okay, then neither am I. We protect him together, whatever that takes. They went back downstairs, the three of them, and sat at the kitchen table Ray had salvaged and refinished. Linda asked questions about the renovation, about their daily life, about whether Micah was really okay living here. Micah showed her his room, the improvements they'd made, the space he'd claimed as his own. It's not what I thought, Linda admitted. It's rough, but there's love here. You're building something. We are, Ray confirmed. Linda left as darkness fell, promising to return Saturday to help with some painting Micah had mentioned needed doing. At the door, she turned back to Ray. I'm sorry. For everything. For not seeing, for not listening, for making this so hard. You're seeing now. That's what matters. After she left, Ray and Micah stood on the porch, watching her taillights disappear down the driveway. Is it really over? Micah asked. The custody stuff? The legal part, yeah. But we still have to make sure Marcus stays away. Make sure Linda follows through. Ray put his arm around his son's shoulders. It's not completely over, but we won this round. Because of Emma. Because of this house. Because of a lot of things. But, yeah, Emma's story made the difference. They went inside, back to their evening routine of homework and house repairs, and the simple rhythm of living they'd built. Upstairs, Emma's room waited in darkness, still holding its secrets, still serving its purpose, still protecting children, even now. The custody hearing was scheduled for Monday morning at 9. Linda had filed to dismiss her motion, but her lawyer informed Ray that Marcus himself had filed a separate motion as a concerned family member petitioning for an investigation into Micah's living conditions. Apparently, Marcus had legal standing as Emma's uncle by marriage to request welfare checks. It was a clever end run around Linda's withdrawal, and it meant the hearing would proceed. Ray's lawyer, Patricia Chen, met him Friday afternoon at the courthouse steps to review strategy. She was a woman in her 50s, practical and no-nonsense, who'd taken Ray's case initially because she had a daughter Micah's age and understood what fathers faced in custody battles. Marcus Brennan is representing himself, Patricia said, reviewing her notes. That's unusual, but not unheard of. He's arguing that as a family member, he has Micah's best interests at heart and is concerned about potential neglect. Can he even do that? Indiana law allows third parties to petition for welfare investigations in custody matters if they can demonstrate legitimate concern. Marcus is claiming Linda came to him worried about your living situation, and as her brother, he feels obligated to ensure Micah's safety. Linda's not worried anymore. She'll testify to that. Patricia's expression was grave. Ray, Linda's going to have to testify against her own brother. That's going to be difficult for her, and the judge will question her credibility. Marcus will argue she's been manipulated by you or is experiencing some kind of breakdown. We have Emma's statement, which is powerful but not admissible as direct evidence. She's not here to testify, and it relates to events decades old. The judge can consider it as context, but it won't carry the weight of sworn testimony. Patricia closed her folder. I'm not trying to discourage you. I believe you, and I believe Emma's story. But this is going to be harder than you think. Ray spent the weekend finishing repairs on the house with an intensity bordering on obsession. If the judge was going to evaluate Micah's living conditions, Ray wanted every visible problem addressed. Micah helped, the two of them working until their hands were raw, transforming the last rough edges into something approaching habitable. Danny came by Saturday morning with his toolbox and stayed all day, helping replace the last of the broken windows and reinforcing the porch railings. Linda arrived Saturday afternoon as promised, bringing paint and supplies, and worked alongside them without complaint. It was surreal, Ray thought. the three of them working, together for the first time since the divorce, unified by a common threat. Sunday evening, Ray walked through the house with a critical eye. The floors were solid, the windows intact, the roof patched. The kitchen had running water and working appliances. The bedrooms were clean and properly furnished. It wasn't perfect. The walls still needed paint in some rooms. The bathroom needed updating. 100 small projects remained, but it was undeniably a home. A home someone had poured effort and love into making livable. Micah found Ray standing in Emma's hidden room, the door open, the space illuminated by the lamp Ray had installed to replace Emma's moon nightlight. "You thinking about bringing this up in court?" Micah asked. "Have to. Marcus will mention it if I don't. He knows the property history. Better to control the narrative." "What if the judge thinks you're crazy for keeping it?" Ray looked at the walls covered in Emma's drawings, the careful preservation of a child's sanctuary. "Then the judge doesn't understand that some rooms are too important to erase. Emma lived here. Her story matters. Destroying her room would be like saying what happened to her didn't count." Micah nodded slowly. "Think she's okay now? Emma, I mean. Think she got past it? I think trauma doesn't go away. It just becomes something you learn to carry." Ray put his hand on his son's shoulder. "But she turned it into purpose. She helps other kids now. That's about as okay as someone can get after what she went through." They closed the room, left Emma's space in darkness, and went downstairs to prepare for tomorrow. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, November asserting itself with the promise of winter. Ray dressed in the only suit he owned, borrowed from Danny because his own had been sold during the custody battle. Micah wore khakis and a button-down shirt, looking painfully young and formal. Linda met them at the courthouse, dressed professionally, her face drawn with the weight of what she was about to do. The courtroom was smaller than Ray expected, just a judge's bench, a clerk's station, and a few rows of seats. Patricia was already there, organizing documents, and seated on the opposite side, looking calm and professional in an expensive suit, was Marcus Brennan. Ray hadn't seen Linda's brother in person since the divorce. Marcus was 52, silver-haired, with the kind of polished appearance that inspired immediate trust. His smile was warm, his handshake firm when he greeted the bailiff. He looked like someone's favorite uncle, someone you'd trust to watch your kids. Ray felt sick looking at him. Judge Catherine Morrison entered, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd seen everything courtrooms had to offer. Everyone stood, then sat as directed. The clerk read the case details. Marcus Brennan's petition for investigation into the welfare of Micah Holler, a minor residing with Raymond Holler. "Mr. Brennan," the judge began, "you're representing yourself in this matter. You understand you're entitled to counsel?" "I do, Your Honor. This isn't a complicated issue, and as a family member, I felt comfortable proceeding alone." Marcus's voice was smooth, reasonable. "I'm simply concerned about my nephew's living situation and want to ensure he's safe." "And you believe he's not safe with his father?" "I believe Mr. Holler made some extremely questionable decisions that warrant closer examination. With the court's permission, I'd like to present evidence of those decisions." The judge nodded. Marcus stood, approached the bench with a folder of his own. Continue 1630. Ray's stomach churned. "Your Honor, 6 weeks ago, Mr. Holler withdrew his son from their previous residence in Bloomington and moved him to a foreclosed property in Brown County. The property in question has a documented history of child welfare concerns. In 1999, the previous owners had their daughter removed by Child Protective Services after authorities discovered they'd been hiding the child in a secret room built into the house structure." The judge's expression sharpened. "A secret room?" "Yes, Your Honor. The father, Thomas Carver, had constructed a concealed space accessible through a false wall. When discovered, the child was removed for her own safety. The family abandoned the property shortly after. It sat vacant for over 20 years before Mr. Holler purchased it for $500, his last $500, I should note, and moved his son into a structure that hadn't been occupied or maintained in decades. Marcus presented photos. The house as it had looked when Ray first bought it, with broken windows and sagging porch. They were date-stamped from 6 weeks ago, which meant Marcus had been surveilling the property from the beginning. Furthermore, Your Honor, Mr. Holler has preserved the secret room. It still exists in the house, still accessible, filled with the previous child's belongings. I question the judgment of a father who would knowingly move his son into a property with such a disturbing history and maintain the very room that prompted child removal decades ago. The judge looked at Ray. Mr. Holler, is this accurate? Ray stood. Yes, Your Honor. I did purchase that property and the room does still exist, but the context, we'll get to context. Sit down. The judge reviewed the photos Marcus had provided. Continue, Mr. Brennan. I'm also concerned about financial stability. Mr. Holler spent his last $500 on this property, leaving himself with no financial cushion for emergencies or necessary repairs. He works as a mechanic, honorable work, but not particularly lucrative. The house required extensive renovation that he couldn't possibly afford, yet he moved his son into it anyway. That demonstrates poor judgment and priorities. Marcus was good, Ray realized. He was presenting facts without obvious distortion, letting them create an impression of recklessness and instability. And the judge was listening, her expression growing more concerned with each point. Finally, Your Honor, I'm concerned about Mr. Holler's relationship with my sister, Micah's mother. Linda fought hard for custody, and when she expressed concerns about this property to Mr. Holler, he became defensive and accusatory. He's attempted to turn Linda against her own family, making baseless accusations about me specifically in an effort to isolate Micah from his mother's support system. This pattern of behavior suggests someone who prioritizes control over his son's welfare. Marcus sat down, looking satisfied. Patricia stood immediately. Your Honor, may I respond? Please. Patricia approached the bench. Mr. Brennan has presented isolated facts without context, creating a misleading picture. Yes, Mr. Holler purchased a foreclosed property, but he did so because he was living in a one-bedroom apartment inadequate for raising a teenage son. The house, while requiring work, provided space, privacy, and stability. As for the financial concern, Mr. Holler has maintained steady employment for 17 years. He's paid every bill on time, provided for his son consistently, and the house renovation has been accomplished through his own labor and careful resource management. Patricia presented her own photos. The house as it looked now, with new windows, repaired structure, furnished rooms. The transformation was dramatic. Regarding the secret room, Your Honor, this requires more explanation than Mr. Brennan provided. Yes, the room exists, but it wasn't built for abuse. It was built for protection. Mr. Holler has documentation from the previous owner explaining the room's purpose, and that context is directly relevant to this case. The judge held up a hand. I want to hear about this room. Mr. Holler, approach. Ray stood, his legs unsteady. He walked to the judge's bench, acutely aware of Marcus watching him. Explain the room, Mr. Holler. Why does it exist, and why have you kept it? Ray took a breath. Your Honor, the room was built by Thomas Carver, the previous owner, because his daughter Emma was experiencing severe fear and anxiety related to a specific person, a male family member who had access to their home. Thomas couldn't prove his concerns, couldn't get authorities to listen, so he built a space where Emma could feel safe when this person visited. It was an act of protection, not abuse. That's speculation, Marcus interjected. There's no evidence. There's extensive evidence, Ray countered. Thomas Carver kept journals documenting his concerns. His wife recorded a video statement, and Emma herself, now an adult, has provided testimony about what happened. I have that testimony, Your Honor, Patricia said, holding up Emma's statement. Emma Sinclair, formerly Emma Carver, is a trauma counselor in Portland, Oregon. She's confirmed that the room was her safe space, that her father was protecting her from a legitimate threat, and that the investigation into her family was triggered by the very person her father was trying to protect her from. Marcus's expression flickered, just slightly, the judge noticed. And who was this person? The judge asked. Ray met Marcus's eyes across the courtroom. Marcus Brennan, Your Honor, Emma's uncle by marriage, the same man who's bringing this petition today. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Marcus stood smoothly, his expression shifting to concerned confusion. Your Honor, this is exactly what I was referring to. Mr. Holler has created an elaborate conspiracy theory to discredit me, using a tragic situation from decades ago that he's completely misinterpreted. I have documentation, Ray said. Emma Carver's testimony, Thomas Carver's journals, video evidence. From 20 years ago, Marcus interrupted. Hearsay and accusations from a family that was investigated and found wanting. Your Honor, Emma Carver had severe pre-existing trauma before she was even adopted. Her fears were well documented by multiple professionals as anxiety-based, not reality-based. Thomas Carver sadly enabled those fears instead of helping her overcome them. That's why Child Services intervened. The judge looked between them. Ms. Chen, you have this documentation. Yes, Your Honor. With permission, I'd like to present it. Go ahead. Patricia distributed copies of Emma's statement, excerpts from Thomas's journals, and screenshots from Sarah's video. The judge read through everything slowly while the courtroom waited in tense silence. Ray watched her face, trying to read her reaction, but she remained professionally neutral. This is compelling, the judge said finally. But Mr. Brennan is correct that it's dated material related to unproven accusations. Ms. Sinclair doesn't testify to specific abuse, just to feelings of fear and to her father's protective actions. There was no criminal prosecution of Mr. Brennan at the time, correct? Correct, Your Honor, Patricia acknowledged. Emma couldn't provide specific enough testimony for prosecution, but the pattern of behavior, patterns aren't evidence of current wrongdoing. The judge set the papers aside. Here's what I see. I have a father who bought an unconventional property but has clearly worked to make it suitable for his son. I have historical allegations against Mr. Brennan that didn't result in charges. And I have a family conflict about custody that's gotten personal. None of this clearly demonstrates that Micah is in danger. Ray felt the ground dropping away. The judge was going to dismiss this based on lack of concrete proof. History was repeating itself. Thomas's documentation hadn't been enough, and neither was Ray's. Your Honor, Linda's voice cut through the courtroom. She stood, her face pale but determined. May I testify? Marcus turned sharply. Linda, you don't need to. I need to speak. Marcus. Linda approached the bench. Your Honor, I'm Micah's mother. I withdrew my custody motion last week because I realized I'd been wrong about my ex-husband and wrong about my brother. Ms. Holler, you don't have to do this, Marcus said, his voice tight. This is clearly a difficult time, and Ray has obviously. Ray showed me the truth, Linda interrupted, about what happened to Emma Carver, about the pattern of how you operate, Marcus, and about your interest in Micah. The judge leaned forward. What interest specifically? Linda's voice shook but didn't break. My brother has been encouraging me to fight Ray for years. Since before the divorce even finalized, he was telling me Ray wasn't good enough, that Micah deserved better, that I should want full custody. I thought he was being supportive, but now I understand he was isolating Ray from Micah while positioning himself as the concerned uncle. That's absurd, Marcus said. Linda, I was supporting you through a difficult time. You offered to take Micah to events alone. You asked detailed questions about his schedule, his routines, Where he lived. You researched Ray's property and found ammunition to use against him. Every action you've taken has been about gaining access to my son. I'm his uncle. Of course I care about him. Emma Carver's father cared about her too. He built a room to protect her from you, and you destroyed his family to punish him for that protection. Linda turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I can't prove my brother did anything to Emma Carver 20 years ago, but I can testify to his pattern of behavior with my son. The inappropriate level of interest, the manipulation of me to remove Ray from Micah's life, and the fact that Micah himself has said Marcus makes him uncomfortable. That's a child being coached, Marcus started. I'd like to hear from the child, the judge interrupted. Micah Holler, approach the bench. Micah stood, looking younger than his 16 years, and walked to stand beside his mother. The judge's expression softened slightly. Micah, I'm going to ask you some questions. You understand you need to tell the truth? Yes, ma'am. How do you feel about living with your father in the new house? Micah glanced at Ray, then back to the judge. At first, I was angry about it. The house was rough, and I thought Dad was being reckless. But we've fixed it up together, and it's home now. I have space, privacy. We cook together, work on the house together. I'm doing better in school than I was before. And how do you feel about your Uncle Marcus? Micah hesitated, choosing words carefully. He's always been around at family stuff. He asks a lot of questions about me, where I live, what I do, whether I feel safe with Dad. It always felt like he was studying me, trying to figure something out. He offered to take me to a baseball game alone last summer, and I told Mom I didn't want to go. She didn't push it. Why? Didn't you want to go? Because something felt wrong about the way he asked. Too intense, too focused on making sure it was just us. Micah's voice grew stronger. After Dad showed me what happened to Emma Carver, it made sense. Uncle Marcus made me uncomfortable for the same reason he made Emma uncomfortable. Not because of anything he did specifically, but because of what he might do. It's instinct, I guess. And Dad taught me to trust my instincts. The judge studied Micah for a long moment. You seem like a thoughtful young man. Do you feel safe with your father? Yes, ma'am, completely. And do you want to continue living with him? Yes, ma'am, I do. The judge nodded. You can sit down. Thank you for your honesty. As Micah returned to his seat, Marcus stood again. Your Honor, this is clearly a situation where a child has been influenced by a parent's paranoia. I came here out of genuine concern for my nephew's welfare, and I'm being portrayed as some kind of predator based on feelings and decades-old accusations that led nowhere. Mr. Brennan, the judge said quietly, can you explain why you worked for the adoption agency that placed Emma Carver? Marcus went very still. That's a matter of public record. I was a caseworker for 3 years in the mid-90s. It was before I completed my accounting degree. And you had access to Emma's file? In the course of my duties, yes. But I never. How did Child Services discover the secret room in the Carver home? Someone reported it. An anonymous concern. You reported it, didn't you? The judge's voice was sharp now. You knew about the room because you'd been testing it, trying to find where Emma was hiding when you visited. When you finally located it, you reported the Carvers to remove the one barrier between you and Emma. That's speculation, Your Honor. You're building a narrative based on... I'm observing a pattern, Mr. Brennan. The same pattern Emma Carver described. The same pattern Mr. Holler has identified. The judge closed the file in front of her. Here's what I'm going to rule. This petition is dismissed. Micah Holler is clearly safe and well cared for in his father's custody. However, I'm also going to order that Marcus Brennan have no contact with the minor child, supervised or otherwise, pending a separate investigation by the prosecutor's office into possible criminal behavior. Marcus's face drained of color. You can't do that based on speculation? I can, and I am. This court's primary concern is child welfare. While I don't have enough evidence to charge you with a crime, I have more than enough to restrict your access to a potentially vulnerable child. Consider yourself fortunate, that's all I'm doing." The judge stood. "This hearing is concluded. Mr. Holler, continue being the father your son clearly needs. Ms. Holler, I commend your courage in protecting your child, even when it cost you family relationships. And Mr. Brennan, stay away from this. Family." The judge left the courtroom. For a moment, everyone sat frozen. Then Marcus turned to Linda, his expression shifting from shock to cold fury. "You have no idea what you've done," he said quietly. "Michelle will never speak to you again. The family will never forgive this." "Then I guess I know who they really are," Linda replied, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. Marcus gathered his papers and left without another word. Ray watched him go, feeling not triumph, but exhausted relief. It was over. Not perfectly, not with absolute justice, but over enough. Patricia touched Ray's shoulder. "You did good, both of you." Outside the courthouse, the November air felt sharp and clean. Linda stood with Ray and Micah on the steps, the three of them processing what had just happened. "I'm sorry," Linda said finally, "for everything, for not seeing, for fighting you, for almost—" "You saw when it mattered," Ray interrupted. "That's what counts. What happens now, with Marcus, with the family? Now you build a life without people who chose to protect a predator over believing victims. It's not easy, but it's necessary." Ray looked at his ex-wife with new understanding. "You did the right thing, Linda. Emma Carver's mother couldn't do it. You could." Linda hugged Micah tightly, then stepped back. "Can I come visit? The house, I mean. See what else you've done with it?" "Any time," Micah said. "We're always working on something." She left after that, promising to call soon, to arrange regular visits, to help however she could. Ray and Micah stood on the courthouse steps, watching her go. "Is it really over?" Micah asked. "The legal part, yeah. But Marcus—" Ray shook his head. "People like him don't stop unless they're stopped completely. The investigation might lead somewhere, might not. But at least he can't touch you. Because of Emma. Because of her room. Because of a lot of things. But yeah, Emma's story mattered. Justice delayed isn't justice denied, it turns out. Just justice that takes its own time." They drove home to 1247 Oak Ridge Road, where a house that had witnessed one family's destruction now stood as testament to another family's salvation. The hidden room remained, Emma's sanctuary preserved, her story finally heard by someone with the power to act. Sometimes, Ray thought, the dead protect the living, and sometimes houses choose their occupants for reasons that don't become clear until much later. 6 months after the custody hearing, spring came to Brown County with the gentle insistence of renewal. The woods surrounding 1247 Oak Ridge Road burst into green, wildflowers claiming patches of earth that had been brown and dormant through winter. The house itself had transformed in ways that would have seemed impossible that October day, when Ray had first pulled up the driveway and contemplated his $500 gamble. The exterior wore fresh white paint, not pristine but honest, covering the weathered, clapboard that had been exposed for decades. New windows caught the morning light, reflecting clouds and trees instead of showing broken darkness. The porch stood straight and solid, its railings secure, 2 rocking chairs positioned to watch the sunset. The barn still leaned. That would be next year's project. But Ray had stabilized it enough that it was no longer threatening collapse. Inside, the house felt like someone actually lived there. The living room had furniture beyond camping equipment. A couch Danny had helped Ray haul from a consignment shop, a coffee table Micah had built in shop class, bookshelves Ray had installed along one wall. The kitchen functioned completely now, with a stove that worked, a refrigerator that kept things cold, and cabinets Ray had refinished himself. Upstairs, Micah's room held not just a bed, but a desk, a laptop Linda had bought him, posters of bands Ray didn't recognize. And Emma's room remained, hidden behind its false wall, but transformed in subtle ways. Ray had added better lighting, replaced the old carpet with clean flooring, and placed Emma's music box on a shelf beside a framed copy of the Polaroid showing Thomas, Sarah, and Emma in happier times. He'd also added a second frame, a photo of Ray and Micah taken by Linda last month, the two of them in front of the house, both smiling, both home. Ray was in the kitchen making coffee when he heard the car pull up the driveway. He checked his watch, 9:15, exactly on time. He'd been expecting this visit for weeks, preparing for it in quiet ways he didn't fully understand. Emma Sinclair stepped out of the rental sedan, a woman in her late 30s with shoulder-length brown hair and eyes that carried old grief transformed into wisdom. She stood for a moment, looking at the house, her face cycling through emotions Ray couldn't name. Ray went to greet her, Micah following. Emma turned as they approached, and her smile was genuine but trembling. "Mr. Holler, Micah, thank you for agreeing to this." "Thank you for coming," Ray said. "I know it's not easy being here." "No," Emma agreed, "but I've spent 20 years avoiding this place in my mind. My therapist says confronting physical spaces is part of healing. So here I am, confronting." Ray offered coffee, which Emma accepted. They sat on the porch, the three of them, drinking from mismatched mugs while Emma studied the house with the intensity of someone rereading a difficult chapter of their own story. "It looks so different," she said finally. "Better. Loved again. We've put a lot of work into it," Micah said. "It's a good house underneath everything. Solid bones, like Dad says." Emma smiled. "My father used to say that too. Good bones. He believed in foundations, in things that last." She set down her coffee. "Can I see it? The room?" Ray had known she'd ask. He led her inside and upstairs, through the bedroom, to the hidden door that still looked seamless until you knew where to press. The release clicked, and the door swung open. Emma stood at the threshold, not entering at first, just looking. Her breath caught when she saw how carefully everything had been preserved. Her drawings still on the walls, her books still on the shelves, the music box in its place of honor. "You kept it," she whispered. "It felt wrong to erase it. This was your safe place. That matters." Emma stepped inside slowly, touching the walls, running her fingers over her childhood drawings. She picked up one of the books, Anne of Green Gables, and paged through it, finding a bookmark still in place from decades ago. "I was reading this when everything fell apart," she said. "Got to chapter 12 and never finished it. Couldn't read for months after they took me away. Words just stopped making sense." She set the book down, moved to the dresser, opened the drawer where her journal had been. Ray had left the journal on top, figuring Emma might want it. She picked it up, flipped through pages, her face working through memories. "I was so scared all the time," she said, "but in this room I could breathe. Dad made sure of that. The soundproofing, the lock on the inside, the way he'd bring me food and sit with me until I felt safe enough to come out." Tears ran down her face. "Everyone said he was abusing me by hiding me away, but he was the only one who listened when I said I needed to hide." Ray and Micah stood in the doorway, giving Emma space to grieve and remember. She sat on the bed, exactly where she must have sat 1,000 times as a child, and let herself cry for everything that had been lost. After a while, she looked up at Ray. "Did you tell me what happened to Marcus after the hearing?" The prosecutor opened an investigation. They contacted other families where Marcus had access to children through his work or social connections. Found 3 other cases of complaints that had never been pursued, always dismissed as misunderstandings, anxiety, kids being difficult. But nothing concrete enough to charge him? Not yet. He's smart, covered his tracks well, but his social work license was revoked. His accounting firm quietly asked him to leave, and his wife filed for divorce. He's lost his respectability, his access, his protective coloring. Emma nodded. It's not justice, but it's something. He can't hurt anyone new. Because you told your story, because you gave us the words to explain what we were seeing. Ray crossed the room, sat beside Emma on the small bed. You saved Micah. Not me, not this house. You. The house helped, Emma said, managing a small smile. It kept your story alive until someone who needed it found it. She looked around the room again. What are you going to do with this space? Long term, I mean. Ray had thought about that question for months. Honestly, I think it should stay. Not as a museum or a memorial, but as a reminder that sometimes protection looks strange to people who don't understand the threat. Your father was right to build this, and keeping it honors what he tried to do. Emma took his hand, squeezed it. Thank you. For understanding, for not letting them rewrite our story into something it wasn't. They spent the rest of the morning touring the house, Emma sharing memories of where furniture had been, how rooms had looked, the sound of her father's footsteps on the stairs. She told stories about learning to ride her bike in the driveway, picking blackberries at the edge of the woods, the summers when everything felt possible and safe. At noon, Linda arrived with lunch, sandwiches and lemonade, a peace offering she'd been making regularly since the hearing. She and Emma talked for a long time, two women who'd been on opposite sides of the same story, finding common ground in their determination to protect children from predators who wore family faces. Michelle still won't speak to me, Linda said quietly. She thinks I betrayed Marcus, that I chose to believe lies over family loyalty. My mother never believed it either, Emma said, not until it was too late. Some people can't see what they don't want to see. Do you think Michelle knows? Deep down? Probably. But knowing and accepting are different things. She'll have to come to it her own way if she ever does. Before Emma left, she asked to see the room one more time. Ray walked her up, gave her privacy. When she emerged 15 minutes later, her eyes were red, but her expression was peaceful. I left something in there, she said. A letter for whoever lives in this house next, telling them what that room meant, why it matters, so the story doesn't get lost again. There's something I want to give you, Ray said. He retrieved the music box from the shelf, the one engraved for Emma from Grandma Jean. This should be with you. It's part of your story. Emma took the music box, cradling it like she was holding her childhood. Are you sure? It's yours. Always was. She wound the key, let the lullaby play one more time, then carefully tucked it in her bag. Thank you. For everything. For finding our story, for making it matter, for proving my father wasn't wrong. They walked her to the car, the four of them, Ray, Micah, Linda, and Emma, standing in the driveway in the spring sunshine. Before she got in, Emma hugged each of them, holding on a little longer than strictly necessary. Take care of each other, she said, and take care of this house. It's magic in its way, the kind of magic that saves people when they need it most. She drove away, the rental car disappearing down the tree-lined driveway. Ray stood with his arm around Micah's shoulders, Linda beside them, all three of them watching until Emma was gone. She's right, Linda said quietly. This place is magic. It found you when you needed it, gave you what you needed to see the truth. Or maybe I was just looking for something to build, Ray said, and the house gave me a reason to keep building even when it seemed impossible. That evening, after Linda had gone home, Ray and Micah sat on the porch in the rocking chairs, watching the sun drop behind the trees. The woods were alive with bird calls and the rustle of new leaves. The house behind them felt solid, permanent, real. Think we'll stay here? Micah asked. Long term. You want to? Yeah. It feels, I don't know, like it's ours in a way the apartment never was. Like we built it together, you know? Ray did know. Every repaired board, every painted wall, every small victory over decay had been a brick in the foundation of their relationship. They'd rebuilt more than a house over these months. They'd rebuilt trust, rebuilt connection, rebuilt the father-son bond that divorce and custody battles had nearly destroyed. "We'll stay," Ray said. "Long as you want to, and when you're ready to leave. College, life, whatever comes, the house will still be here. Your foundation, the place you can always come back to. Like Emma's room, the place she can always return to, at least in memory." Exactly like that. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness gathered, the LED lantern Ray had installed on the porch casting a warm glow. Inside, the house held its stories. Emma's room preserved behind its false wall. Thomas's journals stored carefully in Ray's dresser, the artifacts of one family's tragedy transformed into another family's salvation. The next morning, Ray returned to work at Henderson's, where his life continued in its steady rhythm of oil changes and brake jobs and the honest satisfaction of keeping machines running. But now, when he came home to something real. Something built with his own hands, something that belonged to him and Micah in ways that had nothing to do with bank accounts or property deeds. That weekend, they started on the barn, Ray teaching Micah how to assess structural damage, how to shore up failing supports, how to save something that looked beyond saving. It was slow work, requiring patience and faith that effort would eventually yield results. "Kind of like people," Micah observed, holding a support beam while Ray secured it. "Sometimes the ones who look most broken are just waiting for someone to believe they're worth fixing." "That's wise," Ray said. "Where'd you learn that?" "From you. From this house. From Emma's story." Micah tested the beam, found it solid. "From learning that sometimes what looks like falling apart is really just making room for something new to grow." Ray stepped back, examined their work. The barn would take months, maybe a year, to fully restore. But it was salvageable. The bones were good. With enough time and effort and care, it could be made whole again, just like everything else worth saving. On the mantel in the living room, 2 photographs sat side by side. Thomas, Sarah, and Emma Carver in front of their dream house in 1994, full of hope before tragedy struck. And Ray and Micah Holler in front of that same house in 2025, hope rebuilt after darkness. Between the 2 photos, Emma's music box sat silent, waiting for someone to wind its key and release the lullaby that had once comforted a frightened child. Waiting for the next time its song was needed. Waiting, like the house itself, to protect whoever needed protection. Some places are just wood and nails and plaster, but some places, rare, special places, become more than the sum of their materials. They become witnesses to love and pain and survival. They hold stories that need to be told, lessons that need to be learned, truths that need to be preserved. 1247 Oak Ridge Road was one of those places. It had been built to shelter families, had been transformed into a sanctuary, had been abandoned in grief, and had finally been reclaimed by a father, desperate to build something better for his son. And in being reclaimed, it had returned the favor, providing exactly what Ray needed to protect Micah from the same threat that had haunted Emma. Not every story gets a second chance. Not every house becomes a home. Not every ending contains the seeds of new beginnings. But this one did. Ray stood on his porch that evening, looking at the property he'd bought with $500 and transformed with sweat and stubbornness and love. Micah was inside making dinner, a 16-year-old becoming a young man, secure enough now to plan for college applications and future possibilities. Linda called regularly, their relationship not fixed but functional, focused on their shared purpose of raising their son well. Emma sent postcards from Portland, small notes reminding Ray that survivors could thrive, that damage didn't have to be permanent. And somewhere in the world, Marcus Brennan lived diminished, his power broken by the testimony of a woman who'd refused to let her trauma be the final word of her story. The sun set behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Ray rocked slowly in his chair, listening to the sounds of home. Micah singing badly along with music in the kitchen, wind moving through new leaves, the house creaking as it settled for the night. It wasn't perfect. The bathroom still needed work. The barn remained a project. 1,000 small repairs waited for time and money and energy. But it was theirs. Built by their hands, chosen by their hearts, defended against those who tried to use it against them. A house that had once hidden a child's pain now stood as testament to a father's determination. A room built to protect Emma Carver had ended up protecting Micah Holler 25 years later, proving that love, even love that looks strange to outsiders, echoes across time. Ray thought about Thomas Carver, about a man who'd built a secret room because he didn't know what else to do. Thomas had died thinking he'd failed, that his desperate measures had destroyed his family. But his room had preserved the truth until someone found it who needed it. His story had saved a boy Mapan never met. That was legacy. Not the house itself, but what it represented. The lengths a parent will go to protect their child. The way truth eventually finds its voice. The power of refusing to give up even when everyone says you're wrong. Micah appeared in the doorway. "Dinner's ready. I made that pasta thing you like." Ray stood, ruffled his son's hair, an old gesture Micah tolerated now without complaint. "Smells good." "Dad?" Micah paused. "I'm glad you bought this house, even though it was crazy. Maybe especially because it was crazy." "Me too, kid. Me too." They went inside together, father and son, closing the door against the gathering darkness. The house settled around them, holding them, protecting them, serving the purpose for which it had always been intended. Home. Not just a structure, but a promise. Not just shelter, but sanctuary. Not just walls and roof, but the physical manifestation of a choice made over and over again. To build instead of surrender, to protect instead of abandon, to believe that sometimes the hardest thing, building something from nothing, defending your child against impossible odds, spending your last $500 on a condemned house, is also the rightest thing. And in the hidden room upstairs, Emma's drawings watched over the house. Her music box waited for the next time it was needed, and a story lived on in the walls that had once held her, ready to protect again if called upon. Because some rooms are more than rooms. Some houses choose their occupants, and some stories, no matter how painful, need to be preserved so they can save the next person who needs saving. This was one of those stories. This was one of those houses. And this, finally, impossibly, beautifully, was home.